If NASA and the United States cannot beat the Chinese back to the moon, then the moon belongs to the Chinese and we get what we deserve. It's very consequentialist. Basically, you're going to get what you deserve when it comes to this. Either your institutions are strong enough to fly to the moon or they're not.
I met Casey Handmer, founder of Terraform Industries, while flying fighter jets in Montana. Immediately, I knew he had a story to tell. In this interview, Casey discusses his experiences and the innovative pursuits of his company. He reflects on his previous roles at NASA and JPL, where he emphasized his frustration with the inefficiencies and lack of innovation in traditional institutions. Handmer discusses the importance of ambition, self-awareness, curiosity, and practical experience in hiring and developing talent at Terraform. To fully understand the scope of Casey's ambitions, you should visit his blog at caseyhandmer.com, where he discusses things like Mars helicopters and desalination to support megacities. Or, of course, you can follow him on X at cjhandmer.com. I hope you enjoy this interview.
We live?
We're on.
It's a funny thing, I worked with Jason and Christian, Kyle, and so on over the years, and every time they come back, they have more and more stuff. This is still like a relatively thin level, but like we don't yet have the backup microphones, so I can tell you haven't been burned too many times yet.
So I've gotten lucky a couple times. When I first started planning here, I was deciding if I was going to bring like the full table setup or just these, and often, these will be the backup mics. Right now, the camera is the backup mic. It's awful if that's what ends up happening. A couple times I've had these like wired, and I ended up having to pull the backup from the device itself to do the audio. Because this is so low tech, I don't really feel the need to have a backup, right? It's
fine,
like just recording
Time
directly
Morse brought
to
a
the
lot of
device.
stuff as well. We did that after hours. It was, I don't know. I guess the challenge is that if people are listening to the podcast with a noisy background, like if they're at work or driving or something, and it's not super clear, it's a bit hard to hear sometimes. Or like you have to slow it down.
The audio matters more than the video.
Yeah,
right. The
especially for
quality
people.
of the audio.
I mean,
so many people watch.
I'm definitely
podcasts.
back behind the camera, talent for LA.
No, I love it. Thanks for inviting me here to the factory. At,
Welcome to the castle.
Terraform Industries. Yeah, when I drove up, I didn't expect a castle. That's super cool to see the building. Was that something that you like accidentally?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have so few requirements that we could afford to add castle to them.
Right.
But there are actually about half a dozen castles here in Burbank. We were mostly looking for enough space, power, appropriate zoning, and then outdoor parking lot that we could test in. Yeah.
So what was this building before you took it over?
It was leased by a company called Electrosonic, who is mostly relocated to Florida now. Actually, Burbank in general has really, I think, hemorrhaged in the last 5 years, particularly post-COVID. The kind of production-oriented talent that
They left.
drove a lot of the industry, the entertainment industry. They firstly went remote and they moved out of state, and then they went to other places who had better tax laws than Los Angeles, for example.
Sure.
So anyway, Electrosonic, they did kind of specialized in custom audio-visual integrations for theme park rides and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Makes sense given the area, movies, theme parks, all that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's go way back. What interested me in coming out here to interview you is that there's not a whole lot of people in America, forget about in California, that are doing like physical manufacturing, doing things in the real world. Myself, I've always been involved with software. I've always been jealous of people that could touch their creations. I think that there's not enough of that happening, especially in the United States. I think personally that it's a national security concern.
Yeah.
So whenever I encounter someone who is doing it, it's like super interesting to me. We met at Jared's Hangar in Minnesota and
Montana.
I don't know why I keep saying Minnesota. I'm saying that
Maybe he has one in Minnesota too.
The M states. I don't visit either of them enough. I just
it was beautiful, wasn't it?
Oh, it's so beautiful. The hangar there is incredible. The whole like Star Wars cantina thing.
Yeah, it's definitely like, he clearly specialized in fintech, not in like hardware manufacturing,
Right,
that's for sure.
right. But it's actually amazing how many different kind of things he can get into.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Super, super cool. But right away, when we met, the first thing that I remember was that you were talking about the engineering of the landing gear on, I believe it was the Alpha Jet that we were
That's
looking
right,
at.
because I think you had some downtime, your flight got rescheduled, and we ended up like wandering around the hangar, and you had a MiG there and a couple other aircraft that had foreign inscriptions on them, or like, a bit of Cyrillic here or there, and so I was like really digging in to see if I could remember any Russian and try and understand how the hydraulic system works. You don't, even in a museum, really get an opportunity to really stare up close and personal at the workings of like a functioning aircraft that's in the process of being maintained and all the rest. And all these aircraft use hydraulic systems. Actually, the Lockheed plant was just across the road here, and so many of the United States' aircraft industry hydraulic manufacturers are still here, like literally in walking distance where we're sitting. Yeah, so just across the fence there is a aluminum anodizing shop, so they're doing manufacturing. They're not flashy, they don't have VC funding, they're just operating grandpa's machinery kind of situation. Just across the road over there is Bandy Manufacturing. They make certified hinges for aircraft, so like the hinges that hold the spoilers to the wing or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So it's all around here. And then the maintainable or accessible parts of the hydraulic system need to be in a place where they're kind of lumpy, so they can't be on the outside of the airplane, but they need to be in a place that you can access them on the ground to fix them, swap out a part, check for damage, stuff like that pretty easily. And so in most aircraft, they tend to be in the wheel bay, because when the aircraft's on the ground, the wheel bay is open, right? And the wheels are down, and it's right there.
Easy access.
Easy access, and you can get in there and have a look. And as opposed to being behind some other panel in some other part of the aircraft, which it might be hard to get to, or just harder to inspect. Because you really want to be able to like walk around the aircraft and be like, oh, that one's leaking, or like, that one seems all right.
Mm-hmm. So instantly when I heard you talking about it, I was like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I wonder what he does.
It's generous, but yeah.
I wonder what he does. I wonder why he's here. When I was in that hangar, I was surrounded by a bunch of people I'd never met before, but I knew they all had, something cool going on. Or
a few astronauts.
They probably wouldn't have been there, right?
A handful of former officials, and it's a good crew.
Very, very good crew. I was extremely honored to be there and super happy that I got an opportunity to meet you, and that you're close enough where I could drive here from San Diego and come check out the location.
It's kind of you to endure our terrible weather up here.
Yeah, well, compared to San Diego, everywhere
San Diego,
has bad weather. But I'm a little bit inland, so it gets hot there anyway. It's no big deal. I'm used to it. So the purpose, what I would love to do during this interview is to sort of tell the story of how you got involved with manufacturing, how you got started as a builder, what drove you to do something so difficult, because I think like there are so many easy ways to make a buck, that deciding to get into creating real things where there's real risk and everything else, it takes a certain kind of person. I think we need more people like that, so I hope to inspire. Why don't we just start with like, do you have memories like building Legos or Lincoln Logs as a kid, or like how did you first sort of recognize that you like to build things?
Yeah, I don't know. I think some people are born with it. My father built the house that I grew up in. I guess when I was cooking, so late 80s, and then obviously I was involved as soon as I was able to hold tools and stuff with the upkeep and maintenance on that house, which in retrospect was reasonably. It was the kind of house that like one guy could build by himself.
Okay.
My father worked in what was then called the IT industry, mostly on the sales side, I think. But nowadays he works mostly in recruiting. But he was quite handy, and he'd done quite a bit of work on houses. I think he'd had a couple of manual labor jobs in his late teens, early 20s. His parents were diplomats, so they lived in foreign countries, and he typically lived at boarding school or something like that. So kind of had to fend for himself. And so he would often go home for summers on farms of his friends from school who were also boarders, and like help them out around the farm and help deliver cows and help fix like motorcycles and basically just get his hands dirty. And so he was always, and still is, very good with his hands. He's also been very into boating his whole life, boats and sailboats and things. And so never really had deep financial resources, but you can actually build your own yacht with fiberglass if you're prepared to spend infinite time. And so he did that. I think it was prior to getting married, or around the same time. In any case, usually like the boat will get completed or the marriage will perish or something like that. But somehow my parents made it work. Made a little catamaran.
Oh, cool.
Sailed there for a while, long before I was around. But yeah, so we got into that, and then later on we moved house a few times, and we were always doing renovations, remodeling. So I always felt pretty comfortable around timber, around painting, bit of plumbing, bit of electrical work. Never got very good at drywall, at least not yet. But one day, and I'm old enough now that I approach plumbing jobs knowing that it's going to hurt, and that's okay, because I'm not expecting a party. I'm not expecting a picnic, but they are a pain in the ass. Invariably the challenge, especially with maintenance, is that you're dealing with what someone else built before, and it's not really intended to like be able to redo it necessarily. And then in terms of my career, I would never say like validate my mistakes by repeating them, but like I bounced around quite a bit, did a lot of software for a while, was in academia for a while, worked at a startup, worked at NASA for a while, a whole bunch of different things. And about 2021, I realized it was time to leave NASA, and for the next thing, it had to be something that was could pay the bills, family, but also I didn't feel, and I still don't really feel the need to like short-term revenue max, right? I was like, I can live within my means with a modest amount of money, but what I really want to do is I want to like career max. I want to take my existing skills and test them the hardest possible way. I want to find out if I've got what it takes. I'm obsessed with what SpaceX did. I should go and play in that sandbox for a while, see if it works, see if I've got, I think one of the things that Y Combinator correctly recognized is it's impossible to know at the outset whether or not someone can be a good founder. You just have to found and find out. And all the good founders, all the good entrepreneurs are their own people, classes of one really. Very different types of people, and they succeed in their own way, as the case may be. So I wanted to go and test that out, and then I was looking for a project that played to my strengths and my interests, obviously, but also one that had at least the chance or probability of like a great success for me personally, and also for our investors, and really a vehicle to allow me to take in 20 or so ambitious people and help level them up too, and really just kind of see myself as part of this ecosystem. So there were half a dozen or so different ideas bouncing around, but I realized that synthetic fuel was one that was not going to happen if I didn't do it. At least not going to happen in the way that I thought it should be done if I didn't personally go and force my vision into reality, which is here we are. It's been a great journey. And the funny thing is, I ummed and ahed about doing it for 6 months, and then I finally just like pulled the trigger, and I was like, God damn, should have done that.
Could have got a 6-month head
Should have done
start.
it years before. Same with kids, for that matter. I know you have kids, but I've got 3 kids, and they're great. They're super cool, and I'm 38, and if life had broken somewhat differently, I could have had family much younger.
Sure.
And I feel like I probably should have. Could have had more kids, spent more time with them before I die of old age, more chance of being able-bodied when there's grandchildren who want to do exciting things. Like I'll still be, I think, reasonably fit when my kids are like big enough to go climb mountains and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What are the odds that I'll be fit enough to do that when my grandchildren are 15 and 16? Like, it's looking a bit iffy. We'll see.
Well, hopefully we've got exoskeletons or something by then to keep us moving. Some good
anti-aging
advances
technology
in medical technology. I was looking at some AI stuff recently. That's an area of interest for me, and I think that we're going to start to see all of the frontier labs really start to attack health, because it's going to be such a good messaging for them if they can cure a disease or something like that.
Well, Dario said this explicitly. Like, solving ASI is on the critical path to finding the solution to immortality.
Right.
And also, like, AI and health are the only 2 areas of the US economy that are growing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We're aging like crazy, along the lines of what you were talking about with having kids younger. I think so many people just aren't having kids at all. Right, or they're waiting much older than you even, right?
And then maybe have 1 or 2. And there's no economies of scale in having 1 kid.
Right.
You've got to have like as many as you can. Embrace the insanity, turn your house over to them, just accept that you're going to live in some sort of squalor for a few years.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like you said, you didn't want to money max; you wanted to career max, right? And career is obviously.
Test myself, yeah. You've only got like 40, 50 years of like where you can really go hard. And when you're 20, it seems like a lot, but after a while, you're like, well, I have to compound here somehow.
I think there are a few things that people do in their life and spend a lot of time and effort on that they assuredly don't regret. right?
Oh, yeah, for
and,
sure.
and I think one of them is having kids. I
Yep.
think that growing your family is something that like indisputably is a good choice. And another, I believe, is like, yeah, maxing your skills. Not maxing how much money you make or like how many vacations you go on or whatever, but just getting really, really good at important things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you can really, that's the funny thing, like, particularly in these newer areas, AI and energy and a few other areas, it's so new, and like there are some phase transitions occurring that like one person or a small group of people can really, you can get from wherever you are to the frontier in like a fairly trivial amount of time. And then you can actually push humanity forward an awful long way. Like the actual number of people you need to really change things is relatively small.
We've been lucky enough to live through a couple moments like that in our lives. Like for me, I was a teenager when the internet started to get like some momentum, right?
Yeah.
It existed before then, but people were getting it in their homes and people were getting high-speed access and whatever. And I remember talking to my dad at that time about how it was going to change the world. And we talked about car dealerships and you know, he was in the car industry for my entire life. And he was saying, people are never going to buy cars on the internet, Justin. They want to go in and touch the car and drive. And now I just bought my second Tesla, you know, from the app.
Ironically,
on the internet.
Yeah, ironically, like that is one manufacturer you can like have a frictionless purchasing experience with, but like you go try and buy a regular car off like secondhand lot or something,
It's impossible.
it's still very difficult.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And I hate dealing with car salesmen.
There's a
So-
startup. I mean, people have worked on this, but you know, it. What was the company? Carvana or something was trying to do that.
Yeah, there's one on my drive home. I'll drive by, like they have a giant building and with glass walls, and you can see the cars in it, and it's like a car vending machine. I think you can
Yeah.
go and just pay the money and get the car. It comes down on an elevator or something.
That's cool.
But yeah, certainly not enough of it, right? I mean, like how many cars are bought that
Yeah.
way versus other ways?
It's something that the Stripe founders talk about. So they invested in us very early on, and actually I think I have a podcast coming out pretty soon with John Collison.
Oh, cool.
On that. But they basically point out that like their mission at Stripe is to increase the GDP of the internet and to like really create these like frictionless, seamless commerce experiences for buyers, and like it's kind of decentralized network of buyers and sellers over the world. They've done really well with Shopify, for example. It's just kind of the dream, right? Like if you're a builder and you're specializing at getting really good at making one particular kind of thing, how much of your brain space do you want to devote to tax compliance in some country you've never been to? Ideally, none.
Right.
Ideally, none. And like a company like Stripe can centralize that expertise, and then you basically get to purchase it for a very nominal fraction of the value you unlock by having access to that market in the first place. It's just a win-win situation. Again, like a great business to be in if you want to have a hobby that involves flying high-speed jets.
Who doesn't want that hobby? I never
is fun.
thought I'd get a chance to fly in a jet. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was a little kid. And I'm in my mid 40s, like aging out of being able to do that kind of thing. So super cool opportunity to get involved. But I think now we're experiencing like the second wave like that in our life. Like first it was the internet, and it reset the floor for so many different industries. It like reprogrammed everything, right? We're now connected. But in addition to being connected through the internet, now we're connected to like this alien intelligence, right? And I think you alluded to the fact that that's like, yeah, it's shifting everything right now. The efficiency of companies, how we learn, how we access information. And I really do feel like so much opportunity exists right now, even for small teams, if they just get themselves together and, like you said, get to the frontier of something and really move on it right now.
It's also like it's never been easier to raise capital. It's never been easier to learn new information, to locate other people who are interested in that same information. It's really kind of this multi-dimensional convergence of kind of creative energy that's bursting to get out. I think it might be linked, actually, now I think about it, to just in the last year or so, I've noticed that the music that plays in the stores has shifted from like boomer music to like millennial music, like the music I heard when I was in my teen years. And like that's going to be the case for the rest of my life, I'm pretty sure. Like the follow-on generations are too small. So like the nexus of political and economic power has shifted permanently at this point from the boomers who have mostly retired to my generation, our generation. So they're like, now we get to remake the world in our own image. It's time.
What do you think that means for our kids?
They're going to live in interesting times, aren't they?
They are. There's going to be a lot of old people and not a lot of young people.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tricky thing. I've written some blog posts about this. I think my views on the matter are still underpriced. I spent quite a lot of time thinking about like what would it take to like turn around the demographic situation in the West, for example. I mean, pretty much over the whole world. Like, how do you get people to like double the number of children they're having?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's a tricky puzzle because in places like Germany, for example, like the median age is in late 40s, and just the fraction of the population that are women of childbearing age is a single-digit percentage point. So, where are the new people going to come from? And you can look at what Hungary has done and Norway and so on. And it's certainly true they've found that like by spending some money, and I think that we should spend money on children and creating children, certainly in proportion to the money we spend on, Medicare, for example, like old age healthcare, you can increase the birth rate, but not by very much. But certainly I don't think we've exhausted that opportunity. We could spend more money and make more babies, but just the conversion is not great. The conversion ratio is not great. But there's no silver bullet. No one's found one, right? No one has found some way of getting people really excited about kids. And I think after you have kids, you get very excited about them. Right? Literally the minute they arrive, you're like, kids are great. But like, evolution never needed people to feel that way about kids before they had them. Because before you have them, you don't need to care for them. After you have them, you better bloody well be excited about them, otherwise you won't care for them, right? And the kids would just kind of generate themselves by the process of not having television. So,
or birth control.
Or whatever. Yeah, it's just accidents happen. So it's a funny thing, like this inner loop of optimization in evolution never kind of created like the inherent excitement that humans have about, I don't know, other things. Little kids are excited about planes and guns and trucks and big animals and sharp pointy things and fighting with sticks and swinging and running around and riding bikes and stuff. It's just inherent human compulsion. They get dopamine from doing these things. Everyone does. Like eating food, for example. Lots of people are excited about that. But like, I don't know. It's a funny thing. Kids are great. So anyway, the solution, I think, to this problem is not, kind of running around like a flock of headless chickens, trying every sociological trick in the book we can possibly think of to try and propagandize people into having more babies. Although, there's some value in doing that to an extent. But it's actually in like decreasing the death and dependency rate. So the problem is not that like generating a small number of children per se is a bad thing. The problem is that if we project how much money we should be spending on Medicare in 10 years' time, 20, 30 years' time, compared to the number of existing children and new children, like as yet unborn children who'll be aging into the tax-paying bracket.
Heavy burden.
It's pretty grim looking. It's pretty bad, right? But if you say, well, if we found a technological solution to dependency, so
robots.
Robots can be one thing, or like massive economic output from AI and robots and stuff. But no, I'm thinking actually like a drug that slows you down, slows your aging down.
Okay.
Right. So then instead of having like 100 million people dying of old age a year, you might slow that down to 50 million or 10 million or something like that. And sure, you still have your geriatrics ward, but you don't get there until you're 150, or you don't get there until you're 200, or like everyone who is currently like, I don't know, like I don't want to, like if you're in your 60s, in a decade you'll be in your 70s, and in 2 decades you'll be in your 80s. So like, there's not really a doubt as to where the future is going there. But if instead you're in your 60s and you start taking a drug, and it's going to take you now 50 or 100 years until you reach the level of decrepitude you would expect in your 70s, and another 100 years until you get to like the 80s, for whatever level you are. I know some 80-year-olds who are significantly fitter than I am, which is somewhat depressing.
You
but
meet
then
them if you
that
do
problem goes
mountain
away.
biking.
That problem goes away. Yeah, exactly. That problem goes away. At least you could kick the can down the road an awful long way. And this is less crazy than it sounds. Humans actually already age pretty slowly compared to most other animals, and particularly most other mammals. But the same tricks that basically allow us to live, say, 10 times longer than a small monkey or 50 times longer than a mouse, in principle could be extended. There's no reason they couldn't be. And actually, I'll go one step further and I'll say, I think the early data from Ozempic and the other GLP-1 agonist drugs is that they will have the effect of slowing aging by on the order of 5%.
Interesting.
Which is like not enough to make up for the lack of children, but like it's directionally correct.
So when
That's a bigger effect than like a baby bonus, for example, in terms of fixing this imbalance.
why do you think that it slows aging? Is it that they're just not as fat, or something else?
It's weird as hell. So Starslate Codex has a really good blog on this. It needs to update it, actually. I should ping him and say, can you update this? Which basically says, we don't know how these drugs work, but they seem to affect every single system in your body. And the weird thing regarding mortality is that the mortality rates for like obese and overweight people drop like the week they start taking drugs, right? So months before the weight has come off, the death rates have dropped.
Wow.
That's interesting, isn't it? And
I hadn't heard that.
I'm not a medical doctor, but my intuitive explanation for that would be the things that increase your risk of death if you're really overweight are inflammation-related problems that exacerbate things like heart disease, diabetes, and so on. So if you take these drugs and they treat that inflammation, right, which they seem to, then that proximal cause of the thing that causes you to decompensate and ultimately die goes away. Or rather, like the ability of the fat to hurt you on a day-to-day basis is interrupted. And then the fat comes off because of other effects that GLP-1 agonists have with your dopamine circuits, and in particular, I think addiction to food, that plays a role in like, people becoming horrendously obese. And so there's weird things going on. But I think even in healthy people, like especially as you get older, you have an accumulation of senescent cells, which basically are spewing out chemical crap that like causes you to it causes inflammation, or enhances inflammation, and so the GLP-1 agonists can treat that too. But I don't actually know of large data sets yet on like notionally healthy young people taking GLP-1 agonists.
I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that, because you mentioned it's like in the first couple weeks or something they notice lower mortality. There's all sorts of studies that
that persists, right? But like it's not the case that like after 4 months the lower mortality starts to kick in once you've lost the weight, right? It actually kicks in instantly.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of studies that if you overeat versus undereat, forget about being fat, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just not good for you to consume too much food. I wonder if like because you immediately start eating less, that immediately happens. Or
it also like it seems to treat other addictions, so like alcohol, sex, and a few other things, and like probably certain kinds of risk-taking behavior as well. So like
I didn't even think of that.
For men who are much younger than me, actually like the leading cause of death is not age-related. So at my age, like age-related deaths are about 1 in 600 a year, which is high enough that like I went and took out some like term life insurance. I was like, I'm going to have a large family, and I like in 20 years time, if I die, well, I'm sorry, but like they're old, they can figure it out.
But for
now, they're dependent. So, we'll kind of cover that gap. But if you look at mortality curves, it's called the Gompertz-Makeham mortality curve, particularly for young men, particularly in like that period from like 14 through 24 or something. It's just this, they're dying at the rate of people our age. Why? Guns, drugs, and cars. Yeah, speeding, driving too fast. Which is kind of nuts. I mean, like people say, well, US spends more money on healthcare than any other country, and we have worse life expectancy. But like, I think these are not related. Like, I think that we spend more because we're just freaking rich, and I think that our life expectancy is low because we love guns and drugs and speeding,
and food.
Well, food too. But like, if you delete just those three things, like the thing that pulls down your life expectancy is young people dying who would otherwise live to an old age. Whereas like people who eat too much, it's pretty unusual to die really young from eating too much, right? You might die in your 60s or 70s as opposed to in your 80s or 90s, but that doesn't harm the average too much.
Unless it happens to everyone.
Statistically, yeah, a little bit. It'd be very interesting to see if like GLP-1 drugs have an impact on like road accidents, for example.
Before we move on from like kids and aging, you had brought up music and how like it's now millennial music as opposed to the boomer music. I sort of have like seen something recently that I can't unsee, and it's the culture effect of music. And I remember like when I was a kid, I remember in elementary school hearing.
Where do you go to school?
I went to school in Irvine, California.
Okay, yeah.
So in my elementary school, we had someone up on stage. We were in the multipurpose room, and they were talking about music and how like when my parents were kids, Elvis shaking his hips on stage was like the devil's music, right? And inserting evil into culture, and how every generation, the older generation, looks at the younger generation's art and music and thinks that it's evil. And
that goes back to Socrates.
Right. So they use that as an example of like, well, it's not actually evil, it's just perception. That's what they were trying to teach us at the time. But like, what I'm starting to deduce myself is like, maybe it's actually just getting worse every generation. Right, maybe I am a boomer. So I'm actually like the oldest millennial, like right on the border of millennial. But anyway,
that's because you know how to use computers.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right.
I was thinking like the whiz kids will come through and they'll be like way better than me at computers. And the thing is, I'm not that good at computers. Like I know what a compiler is, and I know how to use one, but like I couldn't make one.
Right.
Whereas maybe like the Gen X's above me would be like, oh, you whippersnapper. But compared to the next generation, I mean, I have kids coming in here all the time, and luckily here we don't do much work with computers per se, like not much coding, which was a choice. But yeah, they don't know how file systems work.
No.
It's dismal. Anyway.
So
yeah, you're saying
maybe
the music is just getting worse.
Yeah, my thought is like maybe that even has something to do with the birth rate, right? It's like our culture does not encourage families at all anymore, right? Like I feel like culture and music and everything else for the longest time, like you got it at church.
Well, I do agree with that. So if you think about media, like what are we watching on TV, right? TV shows and stuff. How many TV shows that are like popular right now? I don't know, my wife watches Foundation and For All Mankind and stuff. Like there are kids in there, but they're not like the center of the story. There's certainly, like I see a lot more kids in my day-to-day activities, just like going home and being jumped on by them, than I would ever see on TV if I watch TV. And if I was watching like kid-specific TV, it's mostly for kids stuff as opposed to, Brady Bunch, like a family dealing with 6 kids, which it's an interesting one. One of the things that I've noticed is that when I was young, and I've the blessing and curse of remembering basically photographically my childhood going back to before I could walk. Walk before I could talk really. Just before I turned 2. I asked GPT if this was likely, and GPT said no. And then I said, okay, challenge accepted. And I proceeded to list about 5 pages of like specific memories I had that could be cross-referenced to things that in principle you could look up on Google Earth or Google Maps or check with people who were there. And that it could also be specifically dated. And they're all correct, of course. So screw you, GPT. But I grew up in Australia, and in Australia it was pretty common that if you had a dog, it would be trained to heel, to walk after you, but it wouldn't be on a leash. And because the dogs would wander a bit, they'd be friendly with the neighbors, and the dogs would come by and you'd say hi. And so the dogs were safe around kids because the dogs that weren't safe around kids were destroyed, and the ones that were interact with kids all day because the kids are the people who want to throw a ball or throw a stick for the dog all day. It's just a lot of fun, right? So my family never had a dog, but there were friendly dogs I knew growing up that, they didn't come into our house, we didn't feed them, but we played with them quite a bit, particularly on vacations and things. Now I live in a neighborhood in LA where all the little dogs have been eaten by coyotes, and so we've just got the big mean dogs that fight the bears. But even then, like basically no one will walk a dog unless it's on a leash, and most of the dogs are owned by like empty nester, like boomers basically, and they don't understand children, and they're dangerous around children. It's weird. Like there's so few children in my like ostensibly family neighborhood, like suburban neighborhood, that the dogs don't understand what to do with them.
I think people where you grew up, they knew how to train dogs too, right? And like
the dogs are mostly trained by the kids.
So many people now treat their dogs like kids, though.
They treat them like kids, or they go to they during COVID, a lot of people adopted dogs, right? And so I just know a couple of friends, I guess, who adopted dogs who had like major psychological problems. Now this is new to me. When I was a kid, dogs didn't have psychological problems. I mean, it was very unusual to find an adult, a person who had psychological problems. Nowadays, dogs have psychological problems, and so I have this dog that's just like, for whatever reason, not well adjusted, and yeah, it's very difficult because I would like to go and visit their house, but I have children, and they're like, oh, my baby. I think Jim Jeffries said this joke. It's like, that's not a baby, that's a dog, and your baby is biting my actual baby. So like,
right. So
Anyway, it's a weird thing. In terms of music, I could like wag my finger at like Taylor Swift, but she's my age, or Justin Bieber, but he's also in his 30s. I think people have noticed that like the media is being consumed by a broader fraction of society, and it kind of caters to like the bulk of that society in a way. So like, maybe in my parents' generation, people would like read novels and stuff, and it's pretty unusual these days. Like you don't see the young people being like, oh, I just read Pride and Prejudice, it was freaking great.
Right.
They're mostly like, I'm watching TikTok. So, I don't know.
I got my 6-year-old involved with reading chapter books as early as I could to sort of counter that brain rot from the short attention span,
Same.
YouTube,
Same.
whatever else.
I read my kids' books before bed, and it's usually the books I want to read that I don't have like digital versions of, so I can't listen to them in the car. So it's just like old World War II memoirs and stuff like that. They're like,
And your kids will listen to
this
that?
is boring. It's meant to put them to sleep, and it's usually quite successful.
Oh, that's good. I read old storybooks, like Roald Dahl books
Yeah.
that I loved when I was a kid. And
Some
the
of them
kids
have
get a
aged
kick
well,
out of it.
some of them not so much.
Some of them are like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, for example,
Yeah.
talks about so many of the problems that are just like worse today, but they were then, right? Like the kid who eats too much and the kid who's too much into TV and all these different problems.
Well, I was thinking like the level of poverty that Charlie himself grows up enduring, and the company town aspect and so on is I think it's pleasant to reflect that that's largely in our past.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, there are still poor kids around. Actually, here's a crazy thing. The number of people in like extreme poverty today is like something like less than 1 billion people. So it's like, approaching 10% of the world's population, which is great. It's actually like, there's a decent, like I used to sometimes say, like, if you look at the chart and you extrapolate, there's a finite number of human years left to be endured in extreme poverty. It's a large number, but it's finite. But actually, in absolute terms, the number of people in extreme poverty prior to the Industrial Revolution was higher than it is today. And back then, it was like 95% of the world population.
Much smaller population total, but just the percentage.
The actual numbers were higher then too. So like there are fewer people in extreme poverty today than there were basically at any time in human history, going back to, well, probably like post the original bubonic plague or something like that. But
So do you buy into the vision, the age of abundance?
we're in it. Look around.
Already we're in
Yeah,
it.
schmucks like you and I are living like kings.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's damn right.
So I mentioned Pride and Prejudice because it kind of flashed across my consciousness, I think, and I thought, I've never read that, I'll read it. So I read it to the kids, inflicted it on them, and wanted to understand what people meant when they talked about Mr. Darcy or Mr. Bingley or whatever. And then I was like, just in terms of the world building, what is the world these people lived in, and how rich was Mr. Darcy and so on? And the answer is, as written, he was actually not as rich as, I think, Jane Austen's brother or something, but still fabulously wealthy, and especially by the standards of his time, probably in the top 100 wealthiest people in Britain or something, which was a rich-ass country back then. Like one of the wealthiest countries on earth. It had kind of begun the process of industrialization, had a huge, like the book was published in 1813, which was after Trafalgar, so after Nelson had consolidated the British Empire, so just fabulously wealthy. But even then, like 10,000 a year, even taking into account inflation, is not that much money. Like, just in my personal network, there are multiple people who earn more than that in salary working at AI labs or something like that.
Right.
It's something like, if you take into account buying power and the amount of servants and stuff he had, it's probably on the order of 20 million a year salary. If you just take into account buying power and inflation, it's somewhat less than that.
And that was top 100 and one of the richest countries in the world. At
Yeah,
the time.
yeah, and there were, obviously the royal family itself had much more wealth, but really, what was the wealth? It was basically a multiplier on the number of acres that he owned, multiplied by like their agricultural productivity, which is, I mean, that's kind of the business we're involved in here actually. It's like pave the world with solar and then turn it into useful things. But yeah, it's, in terms of like what's called total factor productivity, which is something like technology. So like you've got your inputs, you've got labor and you've got capital and you've got like raw materials and land and a few other bits and pieces. And then you've got this like technology piece that allows you to make 10 or 100 times more wealth with the same inputs that you had 200 years ago, right? Which is why you, me, and everyone listening to this thing gets to drive cars around has access to antibiotics and life-saving medicine, and I've got a titanium implant in my elbow. And like, Mr. Darcy, I'd never even heard of titanium. Aluminum, like this disposable aluminum can, would have been an unimaginable luxury to the King of England.
The refrigeration to keep it cold and everything else.
Refrigeration, yeah, exactly. The mere concept of indoor plumbing, right? Shocking. Of course, there were, the Romans had indoor plumbing in some ways. Some Romans, some cities had indoor plumbing in some ways. But yeah, I mean, like aluminum production in the United States really ramped up prior to and during World War II in order to produce aircraft. The United States produced just over 300,000 aircraft, which is more aircraft than the rest of the world has produced before or since, combined. Many of them produced just over the road here. And then after the war, they had all these plants, and Henry Kaiser went and bought up a bunch of them. And then he had to figure out, like, how do I keep these plants operating? And he invented disposable aluminum products, like aluminum foil, aluminum trays, aluminum cans, all these kinds of things, because we stopped making hundreds of thousands of aircraft.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Very interesting. I had no clue that history. That's cool.
Well, like Napoleon, who was doing his thing around 1800, I guess, served meals to his most important guests on the aluminum plates because it was so horrendously expensive to make. Forklift!
We're in a real factory.
Hell yeah!
Love it.
This is Ken Nelson. Ken recently published a blog post on our blog.terraformindustries.com, talking about his experiences manufacturing in Malaysia, including getting thrown in prison for a couple of weeks at one point.
Oh no, Malaysian prison can't be fun.
Well, you can read the blog post to find out.
I'm definitely gonna.
But yeah, he said, whatever you need, I can help you. And I said, I don't know what I need. And then about a year later, he called me back and he'd relocated to the United States and his family. And I said, we need to do mass production. And he's like,
I know how to do that.
I know how to do that. And I said, can you set me up an injection molding machine in 2 months? And he said, I'll try. And I said, good. If you do it, I'll give you some enormous bonus.
Beautiful.
And he did it in 3 months, but I still gave him something.
Still impressive work.
And a salary and purpose in life and access to, look at that. He's using the forks of the forklift to push the box across the floor. He's an artist. He's the Sweeney Todd of forklifts.
He doesn't even know he's part of the interview. I love it.
No, he's showing off. He knows it.
So we have we have access to so many things, and like our life is so much more convenient.
Yeah, so there's a question. How far back in time would you be willing to go if you were the richest person on Earth?
Like, what would be the best time to be the richest person on Earth, you mean?
Well, I'm saying, like, you could be the richest person on Earth in 1800, and I think it would still be a raw deal compared to what you and I have today.
Right now,
For some people on Earth, sure, great deal. But like for you and I wouldn't go back. Even like the 1980s, the richest guy on Earth was this shipping guy, okay, Daniel someone or other. Maybe he's the richest guy in the United States. But I wouldn't go back to 1980 to be the richest guy on Earth, especially he's like 100 years old or something at that point. Not worth it. Yeah.
So
How far back would you be willing to go to have $10 billion?
Well, I think there's interesting times in the past that I'm not familiar with enough to know whether I would like it or not.
Well, if you had to go back, that's a different question. But if you're
Right.
choosing to.
I mean, I think right now is maybe the most interesting time to ever live. I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many things as builders that are happening that we get to witness. I don't know if I was choosing that I would go back any amount of time or trade my life to be the richest man in the world, because I get to be directly involved with what's happening during this most interesting of times. But I do think, so like we're on this arc towards abundance maybe, right? But still, so many people have to go to work. So many people still, the reason that they labor is
Yep.
to put food on the table
Yep.
and a roof over their heads.
Yeah,
right?
roof more than food, I think. I think we've made food pretty damn cheap overall.
And if you're starving, you can get food in America. Right?
Oh yeah, you won't starve to death in America,
Right.
which is,
But you will be
good.
cold.
or hot. Yeah.
Or hot, right.
I mean, I don't want to generalize because like when I was broke, I was young and healthy and a dude and strong and stuff. But you know, I've been penniless and hitchhiking in foreign countries and stuff with like basically nothing, no cell phone, no nothing. And it was kind of an adventure because I knew it was finite. You know, I'd get out of it eventually. And I think there are people in our society who really can't make it work in this day and age, and we should probably, help them out in some ways. But yeah, it's mind blowing. So I think the key thing is like there are different kinds of wealth, and I think one of the key aspects of the wealth of the hardware founders that I'm lucky to count myself as one of, and there's a whole bunch here in LA, there's a bunch down in El Segundo, obviously. That's kind of loud. Obviously, like Elon is the parochial archetype. Sorry, not parochial, but like the main archetype right now. And in the past it was other industrialists as well. Is that sure, like Henry Kaiser died with a net worth estimated to $2 billion, which doesn't sound like all that much money these days, right?
Not now, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a mere single-digit billionaire. What a loser, with 100 companies to his name. But no, what he had was more important than that. He had a network and a team of people and a technological tool set that let him approach interesting questions and ideas in a unique way and build things that no one had ever built before. That is the key thing. That's what we're doing here, right? So like, I'm not liquid and I'm not a billionaire, not even close, right? Arguably I'm a thousandaire, but I'm fortunate to have a team of 20-something super geniuses, and we're hiring, by the way. So send your resumes our way. But I can build things that no one else knows how to build, right? And that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Yeah, with software you can do a piece of that, right? Software allows you to make like infinite, perfect, instant, free copies, which is a neat trick, but it doesn't get you any closer to like a car that goes vroom vroom, or like
maybe the stability control on
you're still stuck
right?
in that world in a way. You're still playing in that sandbox. So anyway, that's why I'm here. I could be working on software.
So you mentioned cover the earth with solar panels.
Yeah, tile
the earth with solar panels and turn it into useful things. So the first useful thing is natural gas.
Yeah, we started with natural gas. A couple of reasons for that. I knew more about it than other processes starting out, because a lot of work has been done in this area for what's called in situ resource utilization. So when Jared flies Polaris, dawn, dusk, day, millennium, whatever, to Mars, they'll need to make fuel there to fly home, most likely. And that's going to be natural gas. And so that's where he started. It's also quite a bit easier to synthesize natural gas than anything else, I think. It's a good starting point. It's a good kind of beachhead project. And there's a huge market for it, over $1 trillion a year. And that market is widely accessible, and if you can produce at a cost that makes sense for you, then you can write your own check forever. Now, it is a bit of a challenge to like undercut US natural gas production in this year of our Lord 2025 on price via synthetic means. It's not a secret, everyone knows that. Fortunately, there are like still very large markets that you can pay a fair bit more than that. So we can achieve a fairly respectable scale in natural gas within those markets that monetize the low carbon attributes of the fuel or whatever. But at the same time, recognizing our current expertise and progress in solar and so on, now's the time for us to also branch out and do some adjacent areas that like require the expertise we've accumulated over time, and also have better unit economics at kind of first brush. Mm-hmm. So the next easiest thing for us to do is methanol, which is natural gas with an additional oxygen atom in there. And that's a liquid at room temperature, volatile liquid, but liquid. So it's easier to store, easier to transport, cheaper. And then the market price for it is 6 to 10 times higher on a per effort basis. So you don't have to be quite as smart to make money once you're in mass production. It does require a fair bit more brain damage to make it in the first place. So that's a trade-off there. and then you kind of look from there, you say, well, let's look at all the other things that are also like, high single-digit percentages of total carbon emissions, which is basically a signal for consuming a shitload of energy to make a shitload of wealth for a lot of people, right? And it's metals, so steel's the main one by volume, and also like the top by revenue, although aluminum's close behind. Aluminum's like roughly 10 times as expensive, so the volumes are 10 times lower, but the revenue's about the same. Mm-hmm. And then obviously dozens of other metals, all of which are present in rocks, obviously. Ammonia, which is the precursor to fertilizers, so make more food, which is important. People need to eat. And then cement, which is a it's kind of a part of the process we already do here in direct air capture, and desalinated water. So we can use cheap solar power to desalinate water here in California. Basically, there's actually like a lot of the world's coastlines are adjacent to deserts, which seems insane to me. But if the water's the wrong temperature and the winds are in the wrong direction, you don't get precipitation. It's like the big island of Hawaii has a wet side and a dry side, right? But actually, one of our investors lives on the dry side, has a solar-powered desalination plant that he's using to irrigate a forest. He's trying to replant the sandalwood forests that were once there. Kind of created a microclimate. So we can do that. Here comes the forklift again.
Doing real work.
Yeah, that's all right. Oh, more blowers.
No worries.
So each of these puppies, the blue guys, will churn out 5,000 CFM. And of course, American made. We just wrote in Chinese on the side. There's kind of a trade-off here between like, buying raw materials in China versus assembling in the United States, or just doing everything in China and drop shipping to the United States, whatever. And we're actually, our beachhead is to hire the engineers here to do the engineering, the final integration, and then we like continue to vertically integrate as necessary to like bring production in locally. But time is finite, money is finite. So if the Chinese are going to sell a commodity blower for 1/5 the price of the nearest US production, then we'll probably end up spending money on them too. Anyway, that's how we move air around. There's about 0.8 grams per cubic meter of air is CO2, and we need about 350 kilograms a day per megawatt. So that's a lot of air, on the order of 1 million cubic meters.
So are you going to then eventually get directly involved with like the metal production and...
Yeah. I was talking about desalination, wasn't I?
Yeah.
So like California uses something like 15 million acre feet of water a year in irrigation. That's about half what we could use if we weren't constrained in terms of our productive agricultural land and cities that are like trying to grow but can't get water, and deserts that used to not be deserts but we took all the water away from them, like the Owens Valley. So we could make another 15 million acre feet of a year of water via desalination, and we could fix the Salton Sea. So like San Diego could have like this other huge city just across the mountains.
Right.
And when you're driving from LA to San Francisco, you would no longer be confronted with signs from frustrated farmers being like, hey, like, can I please have some water to farm so I can make food that's cheap for you? We could just fix that problem. So that's a technology we're working on. It's all pretty early stage, but if you want to work on desalination, our hiring inbox is open. If you don't do it, someone else will do it, and they might not do it as well as you. So you should definitely send us your application. And then there's the secret projects as well. But that excludes paper products like cardboard, paper, and glass, which are also primary materials processes, but they're not quite as energy intensive. So it's not clear to me that there's as strong an arbitrage to basically plumb them into solar power, which is what we're doing here.
So you're doing a lot of what other people are already doing. You're just using solar as the primary
Yes.
energy source, and that's the main difference.
Yeah, so the recipe is simply take an existing industrial process and figure out how to power it from solar at roughly 10, 20, 30% less efficiency, because you can afford to give that efficiency up because the solar is cheap. But in exchange, I need you to cut the capex by a factor of 10. So from like $5,000 a kilowatt down to about 500 or lower bucks a kilowatt, which in practice means you actually need more intense processes that handle more material more quickly. It's like higher temperature, less time in process, if that makes sense. And then also be able to cope with the intermittency of solar. So when the sun goes down, you have to be able to turn off and then turn back on the next morning. And there's kind of a playbook to doing that we've invented here. We've had to figure it out from scratch, but it is doable. I'm not 100% sure, for example, that like we'll be able to figure out like intermittent, low capex, high volume manganese production. But like for all the big guys, I'm pretty sure there's a way.
If Elon's vision of so much of the world's power coming from solar pans out the way he sees it, your company is set, to really make an impact across tons of different industries.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think, Elon's a very, very smart guy. He's absolutely correct about solar, but he's focused on solar plus batteries, plus silicon, plus cars, plus the grid, and so on. Whereas at Terraform, we're more focused on the turning rocks into stuff problem, which is not actually, well, Tesla does have like a lithium refinery now, right? But that's to serve their battery business. And why is that? Well, Because Tesla makes a shitload of money, right? So like Elon's a smart guy. He knows that like, would you rather produce the car whose the cost of the raw materials in the car is a few $1,000s and the cost of the finished car is $50,000. So if you're prepared to get enough brain damage figuring out how to mass produce a car and you can do it for less than $50,000, then you can make a lot of money, right? You're putting the delightful product in the hands of a happy customer and the profit margin you take on top of that. Same deal with Apple, right? They're making hundreds of dollars per phone. And the cost of the raw bauxite that goes into the aluminum in the phone is a few cents, right? Do you want to be selling the bauxite or selling the phone? Well, all things considered, I'd rather be selling the phone, but I don't have Steve Jobs' talent or maybe the noisiest thing on earth. No, it's not good, Ken. No, this is intentional. Or financial resources. So, but you know, like the thing about primary materials is that unlike say Tesla, there isn't really market risk. You don't have to produce a product that's like shinier and happier than anyone else. You don't have to have this ability to correctly intuit what sort of cell phone form factor your customers want. You just have to make a shitload of steel that meets spec. And then you got happy customers, right? Or a shitload of natural gas that meets spec. 98% purity, I can do that all day long, easy peasy. And then there's no market risk whatsoever. You can focus on the tech, you can focus on just driving the price down, riding that solar wave, and selling into a commodity market. Like in startups, everything that's a disadvantage is an advantage and vice versa, right? So like, you know, like I have to versus I get to, right? It's like, oh, I have to compete in a commodity market with an undifferentiated product against a bunch of other people who are also like, you know, really only making a few cents on every dollar of revenue. But like, I get to sell into a market where I will not be the marginal producer, and if I can undercut these guys by 10, 20, 30% because my factor of production, which is solar, is falling in cost by 10, 20% per year, then I just get to laugh all the way to the bank until I am the marginal producer, at which point I then have pricing power. So like, if you can hit the cost threshold, it's a no-lose situation. If you can hit the cost threshold.
Right.
Right, that's the challenge. This is something that American manufacturing, I think, has forgotten how to do, actually. American manufacturing went into the like high-value corner, right? They're like, yeah, the iPhone's the most expensive phone. Of course it is. It's the best. And you will pay it. And you'll pay it happily. You will feel burdened and resentful of the money in your wallet until you can give it out for an iPhone. Right. Happy customer. Whereas I think winning at scale in bulk materials is something that the United States is, you know, largely allowed to kind of seep offshore. It's not particularly prestigious. You know, the really ambitious people maybe went into finance or other areas. But there's a lot of work to be done here. And actually, I would say, if you're hell-bent on being an entrepreneur, I'm not hell-bent on like solving the nth primary material problem. I don't need to do it. I have my hands full, right? I'm happy to do it. No one else is doing it. I'll do it. But if, for example, you woke up this morning and you're hell-bent on being like the 2025 version of Henry Kaiser with respect to like solar aluminum, then just give me a call. We'll work something out. Like, do it with my blessing. And if people do this all the time, by the way. Like I get calls all the time from people saying like, I want to do this. Let's talk about how to figure it out. And I'm just happy. Like, we have widely publicized on our blog and in podcasts and so on how we're doing what we're doing here, kind of in an effort to induce competition. That seems insane, doesn't it? But like, you know, the limiting reagent is not the size of the market.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's one other company based in the UK that's doing something very similar to us.
I had seen a post on X, I believe, that you had made about converting, was it like gravel or something, and getting the rare earth materials out of it? That's another project that you're thinking about doing here?
That's mostly a twinkle in my eye at this point. I haven't melted that many rocks yet.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just once you have like infinite cheap 1500 volt DC power from solar array, everything starts to look like that's a giant hammer. Everything starts to look like a nail. And it turns out that old school mining is you run around the world looking for like some place where like weird geology has concentrated your mineral a bit, and then you go and get those rocks, and you eat the cost of transporting them to your refinery, and then you refine them with some process you have to figure out, and then you eat the cost of transporting the refined material to your market, right? But actually, in general, everywhere on Earth has like trash rock, right? Gravel. And like I'm thinking about basalt mostly because basalt comes out of volcanoes, and volcanoes are all over the world. And like in particular, like coastal areas have lots of volcanoes because it's where the continental crust and the oceanic crust meet. And volcanoes spew out basalt. And basalt is just a mixture of everything you could possibly want. It's like 25 to 45% silicon, 10 to 15% iron, 10 to 15% aluminum, a bunch of potassium, sodium, other light metals in there. You got, you know, on the order of 1% titanium. And it's mostly oxides. but it's just in there, right? The net present value of all the minerals in a ton of basalt, which you can buy from a gardening supply company for $15, cash on delivery, is about $1,300. Right, so let's assume that you only want to get 80% of the minerals out, and that you only have 80% yield, and that you're only making 20% profit margin on that. It's still hundreds of dollars of revenue per ton of like a rock you can literally just pick up off the ground. They don't want you to know this, but rocks are free. You can just take them. And they're full of this stuff. So that is something I'd like to figure out how to do here. And again, because it's in accordance with our kind of idea of like, how do we use cheap solar to create abundance from generic raw materials? Right? How do we take air, sunlight, water, common, like literally garden variety rocks, and turn them into fancy ass like aerospace grade aluminum alloys? You could use it to build an aircraft and like kiss the heavens and fly through the stratosphere at nearly the speed of sound for many hours. Or you could just wrap fizzy water in it and then toss it in the trash.
Put a fancy label.
Like the rich ass god you are. Incredible stuff. Infinitely recyclable. There's only a few grams in here.
It is really amazing what we've managed to build, right? Like you look at it and we take it for granted, but it isn't such a simple thing.
Well, just the tooling to make a can in the first place. Like, how the hell do they make this out of metal? When I was a kid, cans didn't have these tops coming in like this, right? They were more straight-sided. And then they figured out how to like build the second part of the tool that comes in over a mandrel and like smashes this top in. So they start off with a blank, and a giant hydraulic ram comes in and cold forms it and basically extrudes it out up around the sides, right? And then like the top is open so the tool can come out, and then somehow it like something comes in and like either rolls the top or whatever, and then the top comes on and then they roll the edge over to seal it up. Unbelievable, unbelievable. They churn these guys out so cheap that it's cheaper than the drink inside, which is just sugar water, or in this case, non-sugar water.
Just regular sparkling water.
Not even caffeine.
My drink of choice.
Yeah.
So how much do you depend on future innovation specifically in the realm of solar, or how much of that technology is already here?
Well, it's already pretty good. So solar modules are changing hands right now in less tariffed markets in the United States for 8 cents a watt, which is nutty. It is nutty. For comparison, like, what is the price of a Big Mac, right? For the same amount of energy. It's like hundreds of times more expensive for the same amount of energy. So 8 cents a watt. You can get a like roughly 2 by 1 meter, it's like 6 foot, 7 foot by 3.5 foot solar module for $50. That's cheaper than drywall. They're using them as fencing material in Europe, even like facing north, because it's cheaper than a fence. Wow. Right? Piece of glass. Because we're making millions and millions and billions of them. So the reason we're making so many of them is that these are products that have already achieved product market fit at literally terawatt per year scale. And so that's just a kind of self-improving cycle that's going to continue indefinitely. And some people say, well, it might be slowing down soon, but actually, if anything, it's speeding up, right? Because we're still in like the very early part of the S-curve where we're still entering new markets and we're still achieving mass adoption, and like the cost of installing solar has still not really come down. So we're still not accessing those big gains. It's like the module itself is cheap, but like putting it on your roof is a couple of bucks per watt, which is insane, because like the module is like, you know, literally the sacred crystal that absorbs cosmic energy. And then the mounting system's like a steel bracket you bolt to your roof, and somehow that costs 10 or 100 times more. Crazy. Okay, so that's going to keep on coming down in price. So the question you should be asking yourself is, like Bill Gates did in the 1970s, with like Intel and the rest producing cheap integrated circuits that are on this like, even then like Moore's law had begun to evidence itself. Like, this wave is going to continue. There's a feedback loop that's already in place. How do I ride that wave and build a layer on top of it that takes this raw capability that didn't exist before, which is I can convert sunlight into pure electricity, literally the highest exergy form of energy there is, and then transform that into a form that delights a customer, that is useful to the end customer. And there are actually few things, I think, that have harmed global economic growth more in the last 50 years than oil scarcity. Right? What the fuck happened in 1971? There's like a website, and we had the oil shocks. Right? And since then, we haven't been able to make long-term bets on energy being cheap in the future. So we haven't been able to justify the sort of investment you would need to go and build supersonic passenger transportation, because you just don't know if in 10 years' time, when your Concorde 2.0 gets to the end of R&D and it's ready for mass production, if your aviation jet fuel is going to be $5 a gallon or $15 a gallon, and that turns out to really affect your economics, right? If you can, at $15 a gallon, you can justify making 20 of them and selling them as private jets to the Saudis, and at $5 a gallon, you can justify making 5,000 of them, and now you've got a real product, you can make money. It's a real challenge. So future jets, particularly high-performance jets, will run on LNG, liquefied natural gas, I think. They were actually, the Russians produced a couple of like test aircraft, Tupolev passenger aircraft that had the ability to fly on liquefied natural gas, but never really caught on. But you know, the technology stack for dealing with natural gas was still pretty immature even 10 years ago, I think. It's really improved.
So there must obviously be advantages to powering a jet with a fuel like natural gas versus just electricity directly via batteries or something like that. And is it weight? Like what is it?
Yeah, it's energy density. So jet fuel is on the order of like 43 megajoules a kilogram, something like that. Maybe I got the units wrong. I think that's correct. And liquefied natural gas about 55. So it's like, is that 25% more bang for your kilogram, which is important in an airplane because it has to lift itself up. So it turns out that for aircraft that have to carry their own fuel with them, range is like increases super linearly with energy density of the fuel. So you can actually go quite a lot further, not 25% further, maybe like 35% further with a more dense fuel. And that means that because the places you can access are on the surface of the Earth, that actually increases, initially is the square of your marginal increase in range. Actually, for very long range aircraft, it's actually more like linear, because you start to run out, like the Earth curves around.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you, like the longest range 787s, for example, if they increase the range by 10%, they actually increase the area they can go to by about 10%, because they've kind of gone all the way around the Earth to the side part. But you know, that's the way it is. But yeah, 10,000 miles is from here to Sydney, where I'm from. So that seems to me like a good number to index on. See if you can build a supersonic aircraft, like Mark II Plus, that can kind of do that trip. I can go and see my parents more often.
So there's also, like you mentioned, creating fuel on Mars, right? Like you can't bring your fuel there. You spent the fuel.
There we go.
So there's no price.
That's good. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So the thing on Mars is there's no market. Like, no one is buying fuel on Mars right now. Maybe someday they will. And actually, you have to say, well, what is the marginal price of producing fuel on Mars versus bringing it from Earth? That's the key question, right? Because you could actually bring some amount from Earth, and then you wouldn't have to make it, which is it's definitely a pain in the ass.
I mean, maybe you send 10 spaceships there, and they each keep 10%, and then they can fill one to come back or something. But that's not very. Do
you play Kerbal Space Program?
Do I play what?
Kerbal.
No, I haven't played it.
Actually, I've never played it either. I sometimes watch videos of it, but I feel like I would be very addicted to computer games, so I don't dabble. But
I have been.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that anymore.
Good. So I think what you would do is if you didn't have the ability to produce fuel on Mars and you had something like Starship, you'd refuel 2 Starships in a high energy Earth orbit. So like something like a geostationary transfer orbit. So you only need a little bit more fuel to get from there to Mars. And then once you get to Mars, one of the Starships would land almost fully fueled, and the other one would brake into orbit, aerobrake into orbit, almost fully fueled. And then so the one that's on the surface could then fly to orbit, dock with the one that's in orbit, transfer crew and rocks and some other samples. And then the one that's in orbit has all the food and all the supplies and stuff you need to get back to Earth.
Okay.
Maybe you have 2 in orbit in case one of them breaks down, and then you fly that back to Earth. So in that sense, like, there's some finessing there to be done in terms of like landing a Starship on Mars with that much fuel on board. But like, X number of Starships are required to make up for the fact that you don't have a fuel plant on Mars, right? If you want to fly some fraction of the Starships that go to Mars home again, you can run the math on this. If you have a spreadsheet on this, send it to me and I'll critique it. It's fun.
The cost per pound or kilo of fuel is also going to be extremely high to send it all the way there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. But sending a fuel plant is also not cheap. You say like, okay, well, I need a 10 megawatt fuel plant, so that's going to be 10 terraformers worth of machinery, but it might be like, if you got very clever with packing, you could fit that in a couple of starships, and you'll also need 10 megawatts of solar panels. On Mars is 2.5 times further from the, 1.6 times further from the sun, so 2.5 times less sun solar power. So that's going to be like 25 megawatts of solar power on Earth, and now you need some way of like putting it in pallets in the rocket and getting it there, and then like craning it down and then deploying it and plugging it together. It's a bit of a puzzle. Or maybe a nuclear power plant. I think Jared wants to build a nuclear power plant that could
Fit
work
that
on Mars.
in.
Also a challenge. Essentially for the same reason, which is that you need, if you have a nuclear power plant, you need to dispose of heat through radiators over enormous surface area. With solar panels, you need to obtain solar power over enormous area.
Right.
So same kind of problem. It's a bit of a puzzle.
Do you have an estimate, like how many years of operation would it take for a plant on Mars before it would pay for itself to get shipped out there?
Well, pay for itself is a bold claim. I don't know if it could pay for itself.
Never pay for itself?
I don't think that the going to Mars is a like cash flow positive expectation activity. I think it's very much like the aim of the game is to make a shitload of money and then spend that money as in as high leverage way as you can to get as many people as you can to Mars per dollar. That makes sense.
Right. But if they were gonna do that anyway, if they're gonna blow the money sending fuel that can send them back, that's gonna have a cost too.
Well, the advantage there is that the spacecraft needs to be able to chill itself anyway to preserve its fuel over the voyage, right? So all that stuff has to be engineered already. So you're asking like, what is the marginal additional cost on top of already having the capability to fly 100 tons of stuff to Mars, or maybe more if you launch from a high energy orbit. So what's the additional cost on top of that? And so you say, well, the additional cost is you need 3 starships instead of 1. Then you say, well, instead of having, say, 2 starships in orbit around Mars waiting to pick up your people and bring them home, like 1 and plus a spare or whatever, you say, well, if I had those 2 starships and instead I just flew them to Mars with your fuel plant on board, would that be enough to make enough fuel to fly home? And the answer is, if you're just doing onesie-twosie type exploration, no, absolutely not. If you're doing like 100 starships per launch window, 10 of which are crewed, and 2 of which fly home, then probably. It would make sense, because you're going to have synthetic hydrocarbon supply chain anyway. The question is, how large is it? The problem is, if you look at like your per capita consumption of hydrocarbons here on Earth, for like the sort of manufacturing type stuff you would need to do on Mars, versus your per capita consumption of hydrocarbons to like fly a rocket from Mars back to Earth, it's like 100 to 1. So you could end up in this bizarre situation, particularly if you have people flying to Mars, staying for 2.5 years and then flying home again, or staying for 1.5 years then flying home again. So every single person that comes to Mars has to fly home after 1.5 years, like Banana Republic style economy, where where like 90% of the economy is just producing rocket fuel, right? That doesn't seem very balanced to me. As long as it's like by energy consumption, as long as it's cheap enough in terms of its consumption of human labor, it doesn't matter all that much. Human labor, I think, is the defining scarce resource for any kind of thing you want to do on Mars.
Even with Optimus up and coming, you think that's gonna still be the bottleneck by the time
Well, I think
we
that's
get
why
there?
they're like super keen on Optimus.
Right.
Because like, sure, it's hard to make power on Mars, but it's not like 100 times harder than on Earth, right? Once you have the solar panel, it's like, I don't know, 5 times harder.
Okay.
Right? And getting the solar panel there, relative to anything else you get there is probably easier, because they're like, it's easier to ship solar panels, the same thing over and over again, copy paste, versus, I don't know, shipping a gas turbine or something like that. But like keeping a human alive on Mars is quite difficult, even compared to keeping a human alive on like the summit of Mount Everest, or keeping a human alive in a submarine or something like that.
Right.
So I would expect like the relative scarcity of human labor to be much higher.
Gonna need local fuel to build, right?
Well, it depends what you need. Actually, I have a talk I'm giving at the Mars Society conference in a couple of weeks on energy on Mars and fuel in particular. So there's a question you can ask, which is, currently Mars doesn't have any industry at all. It is possible that had history worked out differently, on Earth we wouldn't have standardized around gasoline and jet fuel and natural gas and electricity. Certainly not electricity at 110 volts and 60 hertz or whatever the hell it is here. It's 50 or 60 here. It's like 50 hertz in Australia, I think. Anyway, I don't remember, and 240 volts. It's weird. Probably we wouldn't do that on Mars. Probably we'd standardize around HVDC or something like that. We'd say for surface operations, so you kind of got two different ideas. You got like the dome, which is the hab. It's like this huge area, maybe 100 times larger than this building, which is pressurized and air conditioned and shirt sleeves environment, and people work inside mostly. And then you go outside the dome and you've got rovers and spacesuits. I'll repeat that. You got rovers and spacesuits and all kinds of fun stuff, remote mining operations, drill rigs, you name it. How are you powering those things, right? Are you just taking solar panels with you everywhere? Have you got like compact nuclear reactors that you can put in your backpack on your spacesuit? Are you using batteries? Battery energy density is not great. Remember that range thing, right? If you're talking about like your energy density of your fuel dictates how far you can drive, which in turn dictates how much of the surface you can visit and then get back again, right? Batteries are pretty limited. So I probably should be some kind of chemical fuel, but it's not obvious what it should be. Because if it's chemical fuel, you have to make it, right? To make the oxidizer and the fuel from scratch. So it's some sort of synthetic process like we're doing here. So it's kind of difficult to make it. A lot of these things are actually pretty toxic. Like benzene's pretty toxic. Methanol, ethanol. Ethanol's quite psychoactive, amongst other things. Propylene glycol has this neat property of being technically liquid at both Mars temperatures and Hab temperatures and Mars pressures and Hab pressures. So you could have it as like energy in a bucket that you can like pour into things. Viscosity is pretty high and it's also pretty toxic, unfortunately. So it's like a bit of a puzzle. Anyway, I'm currently leaning towards crayons, actually. The crayons are paraffin. Mm-hmm. You can eat it. It's not energetic, but it's not toxic. It's solid, so it's not as useful as a liquid, but you can still transport it. It's inert. It's not going to like evaporate and poison you. It's not going to suddenly like volatilize and explode in your hab and kill you. You can melt it easily and burn it. You still have to bring an oxidizer of some kind, but I think paraffin is and you can make it relatively easily. It's what happens when your Fischer-Tropsch reaction goes wrong.
Okay.
You make paraffin, so that's relatively easy to make. Because any idiot, myself included, can run a reactor incorrectly. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A chemical reactor incorrectly. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the that kind of went deep there, but that's it's an interesting puzzle, and as another thing, not very many people who know what they're talking about, so not me, are actually thinking like in any kind of concerted way about this right now. So if you happen to know the right answer, you could literally write a blog post on this, and in 6 months' time, all the LMs will know, and then I'll know. And then I'll know who you are, and now's the time to figure it out.
There will be major innovations that happen in the coming years.
You can re-standardize. You could re-standardize the QWERTY keyboard. You could re-standardize your like pi goes to tau. You could re-standardize your convention around current. So like current is where positive charge flows, but current charge carriers and wires and electrons which are negative. So you could re-standardize that. You could re-standardize a piano keyboard. There's a type of piano keyboard called the Janko keyboard. It's been around for like 150 years, but there's path dependency and lock-in. Everyone learns on a standard keyboard. But the Janko keyboard is designed in such a way that every scale plays the same. So you only have to learn one scale and then you can transpose
all of them
effortlessly because it's symmetrical with respect to where your half steps and whole steps are. Stuff like that. New world, you can finally fix these problems.
Too cool. Let's talk about America. You got big American flags throughout. There's more than just this one, right? I think I saw
one in each room.
One in each room. Okay.
One in each room. Plus some foreigner flags on the other room there for the various immigrants that are here.
Okay.
Myself included.
And you yourself are an immigrant. I saw a post recently that you celebrated your 15-year anniversary. Is that time in America or is that since you're a citizen?
Time in America.
Okay.
Yeah. Citizen took 11 years.
Okay. So only 4 years ago then?
Yep.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, depth of COVID. Yeah, for those of you wondering, LA County is bigger than all but 5 states, I think, and so it has a fairly substantial federal district. And you go down to the federal buildings in LA County. So you park in some parking lot, like the police station parking lot. You walk past 2 homeless encampments, and then past 2 prisons, and then you get to the federal building and you say your Pledge of Allegiance and get your flag. And I'm like, yes, a very peak American experience. I actually used to work down there, so I used to walk back and forth every day, so I was familiar with the area. But yeah, anyway, it's good. Good. It was like, hell yeah, definitely a hell yeah. Like, if it's not hell yeah, it's a no. Mm-hmm. But I lived here and I was like, don't want to go back. It's a place for people like me to come and build their fortune and build the fortune of those people around them and contribute. It's a proud day.
So you identify strongly as an American?
Yeah. I'm an opt-in American.
And because it's a land of opportunity, is what I gather.
I mean, Australia's culture is actually not that different to the United States in many important ways, but in some key areas that are important to me, it's quite different. And yeah, it's a place where people like me can come and really build things that they think are important at the limit of their ability, with the best possible resources that they can obtain. One of the things that I point out, actually, people say, "Oh, we can never compete with China." Like, I've never met a Californian entrepreneur who wants to like get Chinese citizenship so he can build his company in Shenzhen.
Right.
Right. I know plenty of Chinese Chinese citizens who would like give their left arm to even get a green card to come and build a company in California. Why is that the case? Right. It cannot be the case that California is so fundamentally hostile to business, although it is in some ways, that like California or the United States cannot compete with China on the basis of like regulatory or cultural effects alone.
Right.
It's mostly a cope, I think. It's mostly just you got to want it badly enough.
Well, I think that's true with business in general, that you have to want it badly enough. And I do think that there are policies and things happening in California that are awful. I'm curious whether you think America is on a decline in terms of having an advantage over other places, or also like, what is it? Because you said Australia is not so different than here. Why is it that even though labor is more expensive and there's so many taxes and regulatory issues,
labor is more expensive here, but it's actually much more productive. So people say, well, China labor is cheap and they have 996, right? Or like in Japan, people are working 70 hours a week. But like part of the reason that Japanese GDP is like $35,000 a year or something, it's like where the United States was 2 generations ago, is that Japanese productivity is atrociously low, especially given how hard they work. I really wish they worked half as hard and achieved the same outcome. They'd be so much richer as a society, right? Because then they would have that time. They would be able to produce children. And so it's important to remember that, like, yes, your labor is expensive in California, but for what you're asking them to do, it's cheap.
And why is it that we're so much more productive?
Probably because labor is expensive, to be perfectly honest. And land's expensive. Like, one of the reasons that I think San Francisco has become a nexus of really high leverage software companies is that it's very hard for, like, the non-high leverage, non-successful, non-software companies get kind of drowned out by like the rising tide of like elasticity of supply of housing, for example. Just kind of nuts. And it's a real problem for San Francisco as a city. Like, a city needs to be a melting pot, a place where people from all walks of life can come together and work together. And yes, the rich people will have nicer houses and the poorer people will have smaller houses or something. Like, that's just, like, we can't embrace equality of outcome and still have like a functioning economic system. But they didn't have a place at all. Like, ideally, they should all be able to walk to the commons where they can transact and do business. I mean, a city needs, a power law distribution of workers in terms of capability and revenue and labor and potential and so on in order to be vibrant. And in San Francisco, as with many other cities, particularly in the developed parts of the West, like, it's really, they've lost the middle.
They have lost the middle.
Like we're talking teachers, firefighters, police, just like the essential stuff.
How can you afford to live there?
You only need like on the order of 1,000 or a couple of thousand cracked autists to like drastically increase the GDP of your entire city, and they don't need that much space to house them, right? So like the fact like that most of the people in the city are still like largely doing
normal things,
more recognizable jobs, more comprehensible jobs, and yet somehow, it's just, it's not rocket science. It doesn't require us to like solve aging to solve this problem, for example. It requires us to use a technology we've had for 10,000 years, which is construction, and build houses, like demand and supply. Anyway.
Zoning laws, NIMBYs, all sorts of stuff like that.
Zoning is so complicated.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So you said, that it's critical for it to be like a place where all different types of people can go. How does it make you feel what's happening in American politics right now, where there seems to be so much pushback on bringing in foreign workers, closing the borders, charging $100,000 for H-1B visas. I hired in software for about 20 years, hired hundreds of people, interviewed thousands of people. It's really hard at all times to find really talented engineers. And I think that you do, to get like a high functioning system, need all types But I also hear the arguments on the other side. Like, what's your sense for what needs to happen? Are we making the right moves for America? Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could never accuse the U.S. domestic politics scene of being dull, right? You know, I live in California, grew up in Australia. Like, my origin story is broadly progressive, I would say. You know, they say, like, have a family, buy a house, start a business, get mugged, like, you'll become Republican,
Yeah.
right? And thus far, I've not achieved all those things, fortunately. But no, to be perfectly honest, I think the strength of the American system is that you have this, like, roiling foment, right, of all kinds of crazy ideas from left and right and God knows where else, coming in together and fighting each other out. And the thing, and I wrote a blog post about this, I'm not exactly secretive about this, the thing that worries me most about the US political system right now is that the progressive wing is weak. They're not coming up with compelling ideas. They're not posing a threat at the election level. Their ideas are largely discredited or, you know, scientifically incoherent. The cities that they operate are not places that people aspire to, and they need to be, right? And you know, my house narrowly escaped destruction in the fires here in January, and many of my friends who I knew from JPL lost everything. Just atrocious waste. And the thing that bothers me is it's an optional waste. It's a waste that is born of decades of just decadence and uni-party rule here in California that is avoidable if you had balance in the force, right? The Republicans get to go sometimes, the Democrats get to go sometimes, and you have a few independents that bounce back and forth and keep them honest, and it's a discussion, right? And this is a problem for the Republicans as well, right? And I think that if you pressed Elon Musk or JD Vance or any of these people on it, they would agree that, like, if the Democrats actually had someone at the national level who was speaking to the needs of the US people writ large, particularly on the face of, like, labor and immigration and stuff like that, in a way that was coherent and was not just pandering to their own base, in the same ways that I was worried about the Republicans pandering to their base 10 years ago, right, when they were not posing much of a threat, maybe longer than this, but not posing much of a threat to Obama and his rule, right? Then it would actually give the Republicans more latitude to improve policies in ways that the people in charge know they need to be improved, but which otherwise it's difficult to have the political cover to do that, right? Mm-hmm. It's a survival of the fittest type thing, right? Mm-hmm. And you actually need to have pragmatism, strength on both sides in order to have the best possible outcome. But what I think is positive about what's happening right now is that there is actually a very vibrant national discussion that's occurring. And if you had to put your finger on one thing that reignited that, it would have been Elon buying Twitter.
That was huge.
Absolutely. Incredible, right? And I think Donald Trump getting reelected, because, you know, Hillary supporters and Kamala's supporters, including, you know, large factions of the Democratic Party, genuinely deluded themselves that they were going to win the election in a landslide. And it was obvious enough to anyone who's paying attention, myself included, that this was not going to occur, that Donald Trump was a very strong candidate, particularly against women, particularly against a woman candidate, particularly against, you know, people who weren't able to speak to economic populism the same way he was. And I cannot believe that in the entire Democratic Party, they couldn't find someone who is more likely to beat Donald Trump. And even if they'd lost the election, it would have still compelled both parties to propose better policies, right, overall. Mm-hmm. That's what blows my mind. Anyway, to stay in my lane for a moment, the good thing is that actually, like, in the entrepreneurial part of America, it is still by default that what is not forbidden is permitted, as opposed to what is not permitted is forbidden, and I can still build my business with very little interference and even occasionally some help from you know, governance systems here, and basically get the opportunity, the chance to prove that a technology like this can bring prosperity to not just my generation, but essentially, like, humanity indefinitely. Like, my great to the power of 20 grandchildren are not going to go back to drilling oil out of the ground. Right? That's like one step removed from peasant level stuff. That's like planting crops by hand level sophistication. They're going to be getting better and better fuels made synthetically directly from sunlight, one way or another. It's the US domestic political situation. Yeah, and when Donald Trump does something that I approve of, I think that's good. And when he does something I disapprove of, I say, let that be a lesson to the Democrats, that if they if they think their voice is important, and I think it is in some areas, and if they think that they should be part of the national conversation when it comes to some of these policies, particularly around immigration, for example, then they need to win a goddamn election. Right? Not complicated. Number one job, win an election. Number two job, impose your will. But number one job is win the election. And you can't scream from the sidelines all day, every day about how, the man who 80 million Americans voted for is doing something that no one likes. 80 million people voted for him.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, I don't know, I've never met anyone, even like my worst detractors on Twitter, have never been like, your presence here in the United States is a dire indictment of the US immigration system, right? Like, I don't think anyone's got a problem with people like me coming here. Or with the systems that initially came. Well, I'm creating jobs and other things, but I think that America does well when people come here to contribute and build and so on. The problem people have is with immigration system that does not presume and does not ensure that immigrants are being appropriately integrated into communities.
Well vetted.
Right. Well, I mean, vetting is part of it, but also the combination of failing to deport repeat offenders and illegal immigrants, and then also just kind of abandoning the carceral state for people who are quite clearly in the, say, 5% of the criminal class who are just, which is less than 1% of the overall population, but just unable to play nicely with other people. We saw this that tragic death of that woman, Irina, in Charlotte a couple of weeks ago. Come on, guys, let's grow up and have an adult conversation about this. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few and the one. And the one in this case is the psycho who's killing people and should not be allowed out on the streets for their own safety as well as anyone else's. Because the thing is, in a world where the government does not use its monopoly on force to keep people safe, you'll just have people like this guy getting quietly murdered by essentially private police force that forms itself. And we don't want that. Right? We can't have loss of law and order in that way. It seems very obvious to me. Just basically these two things combined, Donald Trump and his party could not lose on it, right? And I sure as hell don't agree with Stephen Miller on everything he says, but he knows when he has a winning argument, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a winning argument. The U.S. citizens, I myself am one now, but for 11 years I paid taxes and did not vote, right? U.S. citizens decide who comes here under what conditions. And that's how sovereignty works. I may not agree with it. I may not agree with aspects of the U.S. immigration system. It's a huge pain in the ass for me, very expensive, but I agreed to come here under those conditions. So it's kind of how I feel about that. And I think one of the major problems is that laws like H-1B get put in place with all the right intentions and they're used largely in the way intended, and then over time, kind of the system degrades and it gets abused and it causes problems. And if you're not able to govern in such a way that you're able to update and be somewhat fresh, and update these systems and improve them over time, then they will just kind of stagnate and cause problems. And you'll lose an election. So just fix it. We see this across the board though. All these agencies that have been around for 50 or 100 years and have forgotten what they're there to do.
They do the opposite of what their name says now.
Well, that's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wrote a blog post about this about a year ago called Dittermore's Law. Like Murphy's Law and stuff like that. There's all these different laws like conquest law of bureaucracy that states the bureaucracy is there to serve itself and any other function is incidental, right?
All right, we're live again.
Where was I? I think I was making myself enemies for life talking about U.S. immigration system. I've been through it. I've lived it myself. I was F1 and then I was OPT and then I was paroled green card and then I was a green card for 3 years. And during that time I got married. I was a green card, not by marriage, by what they call extraordinary achievement or something, which is a pretty high bar to clear, quite frankly. And then ultimately U.S. citizen. But that required my congressperson to intervene a couple of times. The process did not work well.
Wow.
Yeah, and now we're in this situation. I was talking about agencies and stuff, but NASA's been around for going on 70 years now, and it was formed in the aftermath of Sputnik along with DARPA, with a mission to be don't let this happen again, right? No surprises, or don't let our geopolitical adversaries drop, launch stuff over our head with new technology we don't understand. Own the light cone, own space, and NASA's done some incredible things over the years, still does incredible things, but JPL has shed 1,000 jobs since I left, and it's about to shed a bunch more. And in 2017, I think Bridenstine announced the Artemis Accords, which was kind of a cheeky update to the Outer Space Treaty that enabled the United States and allies to like potentially land on the moon and like claim part of it for our exclusive use. And now in 2025, 8 years later, it looks like China's going to go and do that right in front of us. And we've had, well, it's been 8 years since Bridenstine announced it, and we've had Bridenstine and Nelson, and for a hot minute, Jared looked like he'd be there, and we have Sean Duffy, and God knows how many administrators before. And we're not that much closer to it at the current rate. I'm going to be a very old man by the time we land on the moon and we arrive, and Chinese astronaut taikonaut walks out and says, "Ni hao, welcome to the moon." And is this really the future that America is meant to uphold for it and its allies and its cultural allies and so on? I'd say like my vision for the future is a moon where when the Chinese and the Indians and the Japanese and the Europeans and so on build their big rockets and fly there, they can land and we can all have a giant party together. We can celebrate Thanksgiving together at Shackleton Crater on the moon, right? With moon turkeys or whatever, right? But I'm pretty sure if China gets there first and they write the rules, that it's not going to be, a place or a
welcoming,
or a station that is built really in the image of U.S. values. Actually, Noah Smith points out that like culturally, China's not that different from the United States. Both very kind of brazen capitalists at heart, but politically quite distinct. Yeah, it's a real problem.
I want to get to what you did when you were at NASA, but before that, I want to talk just a little bit more about politics. With as fast as things are moving and changing,
definitely
right
hoist
now,
myself from my own petard. Let's go.
like we are experiencing, I think, more rapid changes. I think the potential for upending the current power structure and like completely flipping that table has never existed like it does now. I feel like the window of opportunity is relatively narrow, and I feel like you mentioned the Democrats get some time and the Republicans get some time, and I think in infinitely in a world that exists forever, that's probably the best way to find balance. But like, if the balance is going to change so much in the next few years, like for example, Biden put in the EV credits, right, and that would have encouraged investment in battery companies in the United States and auto manufacturing in the United States. And like, at least whether it works or not is separate, but that was the plan.
That was the
right?
plan. Yeah, that was intentional.
And we didn't really get a chance for it to play out over time. I mean, to invest in those types of industries is like at least a decade, right? I would think, to see major change. But now
but like the United States entered the Second World War in late 1941, and it basically, like the outcome wasn't in doubt by the end of 1942. So like, and by early 1945 it was all over. So like, that's less than 4 years, right? And I think you can look at the legislative achievements of Biden, particularly in the first half of his term, and say, well, like, bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act and a few other things, they were a step in the right direction, and they tried to do a lot of different things, but they were not nearly as successful as they could have been because too many people added too many complex stuff to it, right? And there's a lesson in that. If you just want to spend the money, start writing checks. And I'm like, here at Terraform, we should have been in line to like just have like fire hose of money poured on us. But there was so many rules involved. It's literally a 14-step process. The abundance guys talk about this in their book. 14-step process to unlock this money. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's literally easier for me to like tweet like, I'm thinking about this thing, and like I have 6 DMs in the next day with like people like in my social circles who have had the good sense to like work in software, trying to put money in. Right? Like, that sounds cool. I don't want to spend every waking minute of the rest of my life like worrying about the details of screws. So how about I just give you some money and you figure it out, and I'll visit from time to time. And I'm like, well, this seems like a pretty efficient use of time. As far as the political stuff goes, I know that in certain corners of the commentosphere or the X-sphere or the blue sky sphere or whatever, there's a lot of hyperventilation, right? And we saw the tragic consequences of that with Charlie Kirk the other day, right? That like, some of these people get so wound up, they take the law into their own hands and or violence into their own hands, and then you can't undo it, right? You could say a mean thing about Charlie Kirk, and you probably wouldn't even mind, right? You put a bullet in him, you can't go back. What if in 5 years' time we invent the immortality medicine? He didn't lose 50 years of his life, he lost 500, right? And the guy who shot him is going to be in prison for the rest of his life. So like, just dumb shit, right? let's cool down a bit, everyone. Stakes not that high. We're all getting richer, 2% per year. My bold policy take is we should all get richer at 4% per year. I think we can make that happen. And in terms of US's history, it's been worse before, way worse. Right? We had a civil war. We were invaded by like Britain in the early 1800s, around the same time as Pride and Prejudice, actually, and Canada. And then obviously there's like the business plot and like FDR. You know, if he'd been healthier and had lived longer, there's a good chance I think he would have continued to consolidate power in a way that I think we're seeing. I think we saw many decades of very positive kind of economic impacts of his work, and now we're seeing some of the negative impacts as well. You know, from this like enhanced dependency ratio, and like the government is on the hook for the $2.5 trillion a year of entitlement spending to basically insure against people getting old and sick, which is not something you can insure against because it's going to happen to everyone,
Right.
if they don't die young.
Right.
This is a problem. So, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, by definition, I'm optimistic because I'm a founder, but I'm cautiously optimistic that in general, like the sooner the better, the Democrat Party will find a set of ideas and an ideology that appeals to the US voter as a whole, and not just to like the extremely strident members of their base who are part of their immediate social circle, and they'll tack to the center, and then once again we'll have the tightest election in history because the pollsters are getting better and better, and so we'll just we'll even out. And actually, it's an almost genius way of like finding the middle path on not all but most topics.
So do you not then attribute a lot of the reason that China is going to, in most people's eyes, beat us back to the moon to the fact that they can put a singular focus on projects like that in a way that's impossible with a vacillation back and forth between new powers?
Well, I think that
it's very controversial.
part. So China's a one-party state, right? But do not assume that they're monolithic, right?
Okay.
Beneath the surface is like 100 separate factions, right? And she's done a pretty good job of like marginalizing the ones that are not pro-him, but there's still like hundreds of different factions. So there's like the Space Line faction, right? And they're not that different to the NASA faction. They're certainly not like cabinet level, right? So NASA reports up through OSTP or something like that. So it's like, I guess under Trump 1 via VP Pence, it like made it into the cabinet, but like right now it's like, it's definitely a side quest. I'll put it that way. That's kind of a tragedy in a way because of like path dependency and lock-in and kind of survivorship bias, we've ended up gerrymandering a lot of our districts around particularly like social and cultural issues rather than science and technological issues. So for example, I'm just going to like touch the third rail here. When I was younger, when Bush was in power and then Obama came in power, it's less of an issue now, but at the time I think, and maybe it'll be more of an issue again in the future, abortion was like a major policy problem. And actually like Roe vs. Wade was overturned or something. So like this is still like a big question that's going back and forth. Now abortion is a morally and ethically fraught, and I think an important thing to be concerned about. But it's actually not, it is not a policy issue that affects most people in their entire lives, let alone on a day-to-day basis, right? So in some ways, it just happens to be like a very charismatic issue that like draws a neat line through the middle of America that you can then like build two sides around, and then you can gerrymander around, and then like that can become of, I don't know, let's say 100 potential policy issues that are important at that same level. It becomes like the one that everyone focuses on. Whereas I'd say like making sure that the US has like unquestionable space superiority in regards to the moon and Mars and so on, which is like 90% downstream of SpaceX right now, is just as important as abortion. And probably in terms of the freedom and so on of your children is probably more important. But no one is gerrymandered a district around space, right? Or around this particular issue. In fact, to the extent that it's bipartisan, most people don't care about it that much at all. So
sad.
It really comes down to the people who do care about it, making sure that the technical integrity of the effort is upheld. This is one of the things that really worries me about America, actually. There's a handful of things that America used to do better than anyone else, no questions asked. One of them was passenger aircraft. Boeing, and McDonnell, and Douglas, and a few other companies, Lockheed, they all made these passenger aircraft that were head and shoulders above the rest. And those organizations over time consolidated, they lost their competitive edge, and they over-financialized, and they had a series of problems with unions and regulations and so on. And they ended up in a position where technical integrity was no longer the North Star of that organization. And now, if you're running some kind of NFT scan, technical integrity does not have to be on the critical path. But if you are trying to fly aircraft with passengers over oceans, the plane either flies or it doesn't. And science and technology and engineering is the key thing. It's super important. And the same thing goes with space, but even more so. Because due to a bunch of congressional wrangling and other issues, NASA has gone and built the SLS rocket to go to the moon. Until 5 years ago, the fact that it was 100 times too expensive was a feature, not a bug, because the whole purpose of this exercise was to spend a shitload of money and make a shitload of money for key constituencies that are not even it's not even where the real money's made. This is not like Medicare scam level money. This is like ripping off NASA level money. It doesn't even fund that many, semi-corrupt people, right? It's a neat little racket for the people involved, but it's not a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things. It's like tens of billions a year, not trillions of dollars a year. It's small fish, not big sharks. Okay. Now it's a major problem that we built the SLS because it's not reliable enough to fly humans to the moon. Its production rate is 100 times too low. Its cost is 100 times too high. And by the way, it lacks the amount of thrust and energy that you actually need to go to the moon. You would think that this would be an important fact. The technical integrity of NASA would be such that they would not allow themselves to build a rocket that couldn't go to the moon. A moon rocket that couldn't go to the moon. If the moon was twice as close, it would not be a problem. But it's not, and we cannot move it. This is a big problem. Very embarrassing. Okay. I'm going to avoid ranting too much more about the SLS right now. But it's kind of symptomatic in a way of these core problems. Yeah, and in some ways, I say, well, Donald Trump winning, it has negative effects on a lot of people, right? There are a lot of people right now whose lives have been upended by, let's just say, immigration policies, for example. And I don't wish these people ill, personally. And I sympathize with their desire to come to the United States. It makes a lot of sense to me. Here I am. Okay? But at the end of the day, the Democrats had a responsibility, if they thought these values are important, to run a candidate who could win an election. And they deliberately did not. They deliberately did not. And so here we are. And the same thing goes with NASA and so on. And the proof is in the pudding. If NASA and the United States cannot beat the Chinese back to the moon, then the moon belongs to the Chinese. And we get what we deserve. It's very consequentialist. A lot of people are uncomfortable with this. Machiavelli used to talk about it. But basically, you're going to get what you deserve when it comes to this. Either your institutions are strong enough to fly to the moon, or they're not. And they were in the 1960s, right? To an extent. And they are it's in the balance now. It's in the balance now. Chinese institutions themselves, not great. Right? Pretty sure that their managers care a lot more about failing to go to the moon than they care about safety regulations, for example. Okay. And it would not surprise me if the Chinese do successfully land humans on the moon in 2030 or thereabouts, that there'll be a pretty steep body count in getting them there. But NASA's killed plenty of people. That's what Dittamor's law is about. It was you got a bunch of really smart people together and you turn up the temperature and you end up getting the opposite of the outcome you wanted. Right, so the Columbia disaster, Columbia Space Shuttle blew up on re-entry. There were hundreds of people employed at NASA whose only job was to make sure that that space shuttle was safe. But axiomatically, technically, it was impossible for it to be safe. Its unsafeness was designed in, not deliberately, not I deliberately made this part unsafe, but at a structural level, it's unsafe. And so what are these couple hundred people doing all day? Sending slide decks back and forth, getting to yes, on yes, we'll launch it again, yes, we'll launch it again, roll the dice, roll the dice, roll the dice. Literally rolling the dice. The first shuttle mission is about 1 in 8 chance of everyone dying. You roll an 8-sided dice and hope for the best. Okay? The later ones are about 1 in 90. So we're talking, what's that? Rolling 3 6s or something. Actually, rolling 2 6s and then a 5 and a 6 for the second one, something like that. Coin flip and 2 dice. There we go. Not good. So in fact, what happened was that the organization, the assurance organization, staffed exclusively with well-qualified, well-trained, intelligent, well-compensated, motivated, coordinated, organized people who all agreed on what the outcome should be. These 7 astronauts will be home safely in 2 weeks. Kill them. Isn't that bizarre?
Mm-hmm.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It happens all the time. Yeah, don't worry.
What did you do when you were at NASA? How did we get here where you're like, you got your own factory and you're hiring people and you're innovating on an industry that more or less doesn't exist now, and you came to the conclusion that this industry wouldn't be advanced if it wasn't you that did it? Like, there's a story.
Yeah, you don't have to go to NASA to do this. I always wanted to work at NASA. It was kind of a goal since I was a little kid. Didn't care doing what. Would have swept the floors. JPL's local here. They do the Mars rovers. I'm obsessed with Mars. Great, wonderful. Go there. Don't care what I do. Pick me. And after 7 years, I got my green card, and so I could apply there. And I applied to 20 or 30 jobs, and I was ultimately interviewed for one. And a few months later, they got back to me with an offer, and I went there. But like, the recruiting process is slow. Anyway, and I was hired in ostensibly to work on real-time operating systems
Okay.
for GPS receivers.
Software.
Software. Yeah. And when I was there for 4 years, just under 4 years, I worked on 15 projects, 5 of which I shipped, 5 of which were in progress, and 5 of which were cancelled, which is about average. I think I did some really, really good work on a few things when I was there, really moved the needle. Also, ran into 4 or 5 major, like, don't do that again, Hangar type situations, mostly associated with like solving problems too quickly, which was, basically the signal I needed that like, this was not a place that was playing to my strengths.
Because if you did too well, it was bad.
This is kind of getting into esoterica, but like the way government agencies are typically run, you say, well, why is it that Doge would think that they could go into these agencies and improve their efficiency? Why is it that like, it is quite evident that while TFP, total factor productivity in the economy increases by a few % per year, in the government it has not and does not. And it's quite clear the government is not set up for competition or to enhance or incentivize productivity, right? There's no stock options. There's no like prizes or bonuses for like saving the mission. There's like, a warm handshake and a pat on the back if you're lucky. There's no like fast career track for people who like come in, and like half the people who are working here came in as like interns, and I'm like, you look like you're ready for a real challenge. I am. Okay. You're now in charge of this. We'll meet every week on this, and we'll follow progress. We'll see how you go. And there's drinking from fire hose.
Mm-hmm.
Half the people running things here in their mid-20s.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Apollo.
Mm-hmm.
At JPL, it's very much, you have to wait until the guy above you dies of old age, which is kind of crazy. I just worked on GPS mostly, worked a bit on the Mars rovers, stuff like that.
What kind of work did you get to do on the Mars rover?
I'm going to make it sound very boring. So the Mars rover has nav cams, which are, it's like its eyes up on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Takes binocular photos of the ground
Mm-hmm.
around it every day. That gets uploaded to Earth. Then it gets processed on the ground with some software that I worked on that basically helps use that binocular vision to recover a depth map.
Okay.
So you can see where the rocks are. And then you use that to plan the drive for the next day. Wash, rinse, repeat.
That's not boring for me.
And so this actually works really, really well if the photographs have entropy or like features on the scale of a pixel, which is, I don't know, 10th of a degree or something, in terms of angular spread, which means they don't work very well on sand at all. So I wrote some code that did what's called photoclinometry rather than photogrammetry, which means shape from shading. So it was able to basically interpret the color and the brightness of the sand based on where the camera was pointing relative to the sun, the time of day, and local rocks and field bits and pieces, and perform some inversions to basically figure out a plausible solution for what shape the sand was based on what it looked like.
Interesting.
Which is actually something that humans can do intuitively. Right? Like humans are like, your visual system can correctly infer shapes and textures of things, even if, your binocular vision with 9 centimeters of baseline is pretty useless beyond about 6 feet anyway.
Okay.
All the depth and stuff you're getting beyond that point is inference.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, when you described the problem, it felt like something that a neural network could do well. I assume that's not what you were using.
This is
Yeah.
2019 or something. I was actually working at that time on very primitive neural networks for separate projects. But nowadays, you just feed it into ChatGPT and be like, give me a depth map, bro. And it'd be like, here you go. And then you'd be done.
Unbelievable. What?
Not that JPL will be using that sort of technology. So the code base I was working on was called Vicar. I can't remember what it stands for, but they started work on it in the 1960s. And it was still like, chunks of it was still written in Fortran, 66, like old school stuff. And even the newer sections are written in like pre-ANSI C++, which is pretty desperate. So I was prototyping in Python because I usually use Mathematica, but I decided at JPL I'd use Python. So I was prototyping in Python using NumPy, which I got pretty quick at that. I'm pretty good at writing vectorized image processing algorithms and things like that. So it ran pretty quick. You download 10,000 images or something and run test cases and test against ground truth and like make sure that like around the edges of your sand patch it's matching with your existing data, for example. It was reasonably quick for an interpreted language. Then I re-implemented it in their C, like the C code they were using, the C++ code, and it was slower. And I was like, why? Well, because they're not using LARPAC or anything. They're like, everything is just being done just like by dereferencing pointers. And I worked on some real doozies of code. I think I heard that you're a self-taught coder as well. I've worked on some really horrendous scientific code bases, but this was next level. And it dawned on me about 2 weeks after it dawned on people I was working with that my realization of the fact that their code was in dire need of refactoring was actually more of a threat than a benefit. And I was asked not to come back. It's just dismal, right? It's like, here's the thing that bothers me, and I wrote a blog post about this as well. NASA should be the tip of the spear of US technology and innovation, and in some ways it is. Right? There are some things that it is still the place where inventions are coming out of. Real innovation is occurring there, but mostly it's not anymore. Right? Mostly it's lifelong bureaucrats who once did really innovative stuff and came there and got institutionalized. And if it was the place that was the tip of the spear of US technology innovation, it would have higher productivity than anywhere else, because they would be the places inventing and metabolizing the sort of manufacturing technology that would then show up in factories 10 years later and places like this 30 years later, right? But it's not. It's not. Their productivity is abysmal. It's abysmal. You can do an apples to apples comparison of like JPL working on particular technology versus a contractor that's right outside JPL's gates with a workforce that is quite mobile between the two, such as Honeybee, which is now owned by Blue Origin, for example, working on much the same technology with the same customer, which is NASA, the same kinds of missions, and their productivity per thing. And it's like a factor of 10 is easy. It's not like we're 10% behind. It's like we have 10 people doing the work of one person in 10 weeks instead of one person doing the work of 10 people in 1 week. Absolutely mind-blowing. And I would be shocked. I would be absolutely shocked if we beat the Chinese back to the moon in any kind of durable way if we did not address that problem root and branch. The problem is not that the people at NASA are like fundamentally the wrong kind of people, but they are in the wrong kinds of roles for their skills relative to where they should be in the organization. And the work that they're doing is nowhere near demanding enough. Absolutely. There's no feedback. There's no accountability. There's no incentivization of productivity. There's no rewards of that. If anything, it's the opposite.
It's always about incentives.
Yeah, it's not complicated. Like, look at the product and then you can infer the incentives. I wrote a blog post about NASA 5 years ago where I was looking at SLS and I kind of inferred from some of the failures that had occurred very granular bits of information that were not public knowledge about how they must have occurred. And this is before I worked at NASA. So I was able to, it must have been, maybe I was working at NASA then. Anyway, NASA was quite friendly about the fact that I wrote critical blog posts about other NASA centers, not about JPL. It wasn't so much. Okay. This goes back to 1930. And I'm like, NASA only formed in 1958. And they're like, I know. But basically, you're able to infer from like what public information there was, plus what had happened, what must have happened behind the scenes. This is actually an active area of counterintelligence work. So if you work in counterintelligence, you have to make inferences over what the enemy's state of knowledge must be, knowing what you know about what they know. Cryptonomicon actually talks a bit about this, the Neil Stevenson novel.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after I wrote this, a number of insiders reached out and said, I don't know how you knew this, but you're absolutely correct. But it's actually worse than that. Let me tell you. And I was like, let me get a pen. Yeah, it's exactly what you think. And it's not unique to NASA. I'd say NASA is actually probably one of the best run US agencies, which is...
I think that they have the benefit of aspirational talent, right? Like people want to be a part of NASA.
That was certainly the case in the past, less so now.
Well, now but SpaceX competes for those same
Blue
people.
Origin and Rocket Lab and Stoke and so on.
Right.
Yeah, so So I mentioned before that like JPL's recruiting process was a bit unorthodox. Um, 20 years ago, if you wanted to work on Mars rovers, you just had to deal with it. And their recruiting operation didn't have to be competitive because they had a fire hose of ambitious, aspirational Mars rover engineers who wanted to come there and work on stuff. People like Mark Rober, for
Right.
example, who's
Right.
now in our business, um, amongst many, 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 many others. Um, but nowadays, like, these people will graduate top of their class and they'll throw a resume over the wall to SpaceX and Blue Origin and NASA and so on. And NASA won't even call them back. Won't even call them back. And SpaceX will be like, yeah, come down. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, we'll pay you 20% more than you paid at JPL and you'll be promoted every year.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you can hold on, right? As long as you can keep up. And so solve for the equilibrium, an organization that's unwilling to be competitive on hiring, that won't promote ambitious people and instead allow them to just like leave and go to Apple or something, and won't fire underperformers or won't move people around if they're not succeeding. It's not good.
No, it's not a good recipe.
Nope. It's a real worry. And it wouldn't be such like at the end of the day, $20 billion at national government scale here or there. I don't care that much about it. If you look at how much money is lost from Medicare fraud, it's probably like $100 billion. So like, in the grand scheme of things. But it is important because there's no other agency who's going to save us from a totalitarian dictatorship owning the light code,
Mm-hmm.
like owning the future of humanity and boxing the rest of us in here on Earth.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
It is, I think, super important, aside from better management of places like NASA,
Yeah.
that we do more business development and manufacturing in the United States to help solve those problems. That fly's been flying around this whole
That was a
interview.
mosquito.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
More important to get.
It was actually a native mosquito. Speaking of unwelcome immigrants, there's an invasive mosquito in the United States, in particular here in LA. I think it's called the Asian tiger mosquito. Came in on ships, of course, and it's been spreading, and it's out competing the native mosquito, which is usually a pretty benign little brown thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Asian tiger mosquito is like a zebra. It's like stripes, white and black.
Sure.
It's really painful. I grew up in Australia where mosquitoes sometimes abduct small children, and so
They fly away.
yeah, I know mosquitoes, but these ones are real assholes. And like, what is our Bureau of Reclamation doing about it? What is our CDC doing about it? We got people dying of typhoid or some typhus or some like mosquito-borne diseases here in LA, and like, it's an invasive mosquito that's harming local populations, and we have the technology to kill them all, right? So like staged releases of sterilized males at breeding season, and or gene drive, and or whatever. I could probably do it in my garage actually, and just kill them all. And we have an entire agency whose job and authority it is to safeguard our environment from invasive pests. And heaven help me if I wanted to import some bug from Asia to help me out in my project here.
Oh, no way.
No
Yeah.
fucking way, right? You can do 15,000 page environmental impact statement and get sued by the Sierra Club forever. But when it comes to like, oh, by the way, we are being invaded. Okay, like the screwworms come back. We've done, I think, okay with that hornet that's in the northwest.
Okay.
But like this mosquito that basically means that like LA used to be a place where you could enjoy the cooler evenings outside. Now you can't do it unless you spray yourself with DEET.
Right.
It's bullshit. Anyway, if you know how to kill all these mosquitoes in the Americas, I will offer you a small cash prize plus infinite kudos. I believe this is something we could actually do in kind of a guerrilla sense. It's not that hard. We have the technology. We just choose to endure it for some unknown reason.
So you mentioned self-taught. You saw that I was self-taught. I was going to ask you the question, like, how do you go about learning all of these different things? You've done GPS, you've done image process software. Now you're working with chemical engineering and as well as machine engineering and all. What is your process like for deciding what you want to do, and like how do you just start doing it? How do you get here?
It helps to be really curious. It helps to be just compulsive about consuming information and filing it away. Just a big, broad general knowledge helps if you want to do lots of different things, obviously. Yeah, and then just stay curious. Keep your eye open for opportunities. I think the entrepreneurial mindset is like, Jesus Christ, that's a pain in the ass. That's as far as Australians get. What a pain in the ass, Probably a less polite way of saying that. And then the entrepreneurial mindset is like, I could fix that, and I bet other people would pay me to fix it for them too.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you professionalize the process of like dealing with a pain in the ass problem. It's no longer as painful because you've had practice dealing with it, and you help other people too, right? That's part of it. And now, like, I've done this for a few years. Every time I see something that's broken, I'm like, there's a business. There's a business. Or like if someone's doing something that just seems ridiculously pointless and stupid, like as a business, but they're successful, I'm like, I can see the pain that they're solving. I'm like, yeah, this is really cool business. That's super cool and good for them. And usually, like with this sort of thing, it is genuinely a pain in the ass. Like when I first started this company, people said, "Oh, what's your moat? It doesn't sound all that hard. If you're a newcomer and you can make progress, anyone can make progress." I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm just crazy. Helps me curious, but you got to throw yourself at the books. You got to learn from everyone who came before. This is so easy now with LLMs. You say, LLM, I want to know everything there is to know about this subject. Rank all the textbooks according to these metrics. Right. So I wanted to learn more about Hyman Rickover, who was the founder of the U.S. nuclear navy.
Okay.
A fascinating individual. And also interesting in like Henry Kaiser, his career didn't really get going until his late 40s and early 50s. So there's hope for me yet. And
yeah, cheers to that.
And I just went through like list all the biographies. Who wrote all the biographies? Okay. Who are the biographers actually working with him? Okay. Which of these biographies actually dealt with technical matters, not just like, and then we had tea, right? And then I found Theodore Rockwell's biography, which like Leslie Grove's memoir about the Manhattan Project is literally just like paragraph by paragraph, blow by blow account of like how they went about solving the problems. Just incredible. Like way more useful information there for me than generic names and dates type stuff. Step 2, like I don't know, step N+1 is you build a business. Why? Because a Delaware type C corporation, or Texas if you must, Nevada, is the shelling point of a way of organizing the labor of people. Yes. There's a mechanism that exists so you can get people to come work on your stuff. And then you go and hire really smart people, and then once you have them on your payroll, you interrogate them gently. Say, explain to me this, that, and the other. You show up to the design review, and there's some like brutally obvious thing that you don't understand on line 2. They're like, what does that mean? And half the people at the table look at you like you're an idiot, and the other half look at you like, oh, I was wondering too. And you just get the habit of just being dumb and just asking and going back to your assumptions and testing your principles and trying stuff and making mistakes and learning and going over and over again. And like, people sometimes say like, how is it that Elon does what he does? And I'm like, it's less mysterious than people think, right? Simply, like, once in a generation IQ plus like psychic drive,
pain tolerance,
obviously, like the psychological aspects of that, right? And you're either born with that or you're not. But even if you're not like as smart as Elon, doesn't mean you can't be successful. If anything, you might be more successful because, like, actually, I went through Caltech, I went to JPL. I know a lot of very smart people who spend most of their intellectual effort just like shooting themselves in the foot. The determination is more important actually, and you can cultivate that. You can't actually make yourself all that much smarter. You can make yourself wiser maybe by consuming media, like books and stuff. But in terms of raw,
you're kind of born with your processing power.
Yeah. You can learn to use it. You can learn to harness what you have, to an extent, and then just like 80-hour weeks compounding for 30 years, right? And people say this, like when Elon started out doing rockets in 2002, he didn't know anything, right? He showed up to like random space conferences and like cornered people and asked them questions in his usual way until like, I don't know. And then he'd say, who knows? And then you find that person, right? And he'd say, give me your reading list. And then he'd just read all the textbooks. And then I think he read them all in German and Russian too. Learned German and Russian to read the textbooks there too, right? And then he started building spreadsheets. All businesses begin as spreadsheets. And then he started hiring these world experts and then pestering them. And they said within 18 months or 2 years, he knew everything. Like, not everything. Obviously, he's still learning now, but like, he went from not knowing anything to knowing more than like most of the candidates he deal with. And I feel like in their area of expertise, the people I deal with here who I'm hiring, they know more than I do. But like, I can give them a run for their money on almost anything else at this point. And that's important because it means they can have confidence when they come to work. Their work will be appreciated by management that's like technically interested in what they do. It's not just like, engineering is this giant cost center department that like misses deadlines and fucks my shit up, right? No, it's like, we're here to build shit and like learn how to do it while we're doing it and reindustrialize. And I came to terms long ago with the fact that like going out and hiring really good managers is almost impossible. It's just really hard. So what do? You make managers. You take your ambitious early career people and you level them up, level them up, level them up, level them up, and you never let them get complacent or think, I can't learn how to do this. And then by, in 5 years' time, you have the managers you want, and then they go out and hire the next bunch of people. Every now and then you bring in someone who has the right of expertise and so on. But the problem is, it's a bit like maybe Ultimate Fighting or something. Like even a seasoned entrepreneur or a seasoned manager, they're not seasoned enough. Like, you don't have a statistically significant number of successes.
Right.
Very few people do. And so almost always they'll over-index on their previous playbook, so it won't be appropriate for what you're doing. I've just seen this time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Google founders recognized that, and they took their sweet time in finding Eric Schmidt to run the company. Are you comfortable? You seem a bit...
No, I'm good. Yeah. I don't know. Did I look uncomfortable? Just leaning forward, maybe. No, I'm good.
Is it bathroom or something? Yeah. So I think if you are... Well, frankly, I think at this point, like, the inefficiencies in the software world have been pretty much, wound out, and a lot of great businesses are made, but very few of them really attained the heights of the first generation of internet businesses.
Right.
The Googles and the Facebooks of this world are still the uncontested titans of that industry. And so if you're ambitious and maybe relatively young, or you've got a couple more decades left, like, you want to make your mark, you need to go somewhere where, like, there's a lot of fresh ideas and soil and opportunities. And the key thing that's happening now that wasn't happening before is solar's getting cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So you can ride that wave. It's an anomaly in the matrix. But everything else is nothing ever happens, and solar's getting cheap, and also SpaceX is doing crazy stuff. So, like, those are two examples of things that are changing pretty dramatically, and you can build a business around this. There's 1,000 businesses to be built around solar.
Mm-hmm.
Really. This is just, Terraform is just like a really painful one.
Is that how you chose it? Like, in the face of abundant curiosity, where everything that you see that's pain is an opportunity for a business, how do you find focus? How do you choose the problem that you're going to solve and stick with it for long enough to make an impact? Because there's limitless things out there that you could sort of choose.
Like classes of infinities. There's like infinite bad ideas and infinite good ideas that are still bad for you, and then a much smaller number, but still infinite number of ideas that you could do. Well, I mean, I looked around. I had a look at what other people were working on, and I thought, well, in some of these areas, there's already, like, the market is already pointing towards a solution, right? So let's take inefficiencies in solar deployment. So, like, one of my major frustrations is that I can buy a module in the United States, I can buy a module for 14 cents a watt, but it's going to cost me about another $1 to pay someone to put it on the ground for me. Makes no sense. It should be like 10 cents to put it on the ground. 14 cents for the module, 10 cents for everything else. Most of my money is being spent on the thing that's actually making the power.
Right.
Low idiot index. But, like, that's obvious. So, like, plenty of other businesses out there are like, wow, the incumbents are really slow off the mark on this one. I bet there's money to be made in, like, taking this pain point of solar installation and reducing it. But obvious. A lot of people working on it. Also, am I a mechanical engineer? No. Do I have experience with, like, autonomous vehicles? No. How about hydraulics? No. What have I experience doing? Really complicated systems engineering, and, like, a bit of everything. A bit of physics, a bit of chemistry, a bit of coding, a bit of everything. So I need to find something that's, like, very syncretic and, like, very, like, systems integratory and, like, putting things together in new ways. And so you have to go, like, far enough out. Just like the old saying, you gotta, like, swim out into the ocean until you start seeing sharks. And it was kind of that sort of situation. Like, I don't really have a competitive advantage versus, like, some SpaceX refugee and starting some, like, very focused, hardware engineering focused business. Unless, like, I happen to have a particular obsession with that. I'll probably do it now. But 4 years ago, I don't think I convinced myself that's a good use of my time. So that, or something else that's, like, equally ambitious, but maybe in another area. So I was also looking closely into high-speed and supersonic electric drones.
Okay.
Which, in retrospect, if I'd started a business doing that 5 years ago, I would probably have found good work selling to the Ukrainians, for example. But again, Ukraine war having taken place, plenty of people have seen the light on, like, well, shit, it's a drone that has a thrust-to-weight ratio of 10. I bet I could put it through the sound barrier if I tried hard enough. And now they're trying. and they will ultimately succeed. Although, all things considered, if you just want to break the sound barrier, probably like just a big solid fuel rocket is the way to go. It's very, very straightforward to build those by comparison. You can't use them more than once, but it's just mechanically simple. Yeah, and then I thought as soon as I like understood that synthetic fuel was the thing that you make work on Earth and not just on Mars, like it would be preferable to drilling ultimately, and that no one else is really working on it in a way that I felt was sufficiently focused on cost parity with drilling. It wasn't going to happen unless I did it. Yeah, and I don't think me doing it has compelled other people to not do it. So if I hadn't done it, I'm pretty sure that in 2025 still no one would have done it. There's a handful of other businesses out there doing little pieces of this puzzle one way or another, but I didn't think they weren't doing it the way I was going to do it. I want to do it my way.
So what are you looking for in people that you recruit here at Terraform, and
Good question.
and why would they love to make this their home?
Yeah, or Burbank's Field of Dreams. I mean, if you're still listening to the podcast at this point, man, you might have the pain tolerance to succeed here. It's a beautiful thing to be given resources and opportunity to like test yourself. I feel like where we are today is like the very early days at SpaceX or something, and you know the people who are working here, whether at Terraform or some other company in the future, will genuinely be the titans in the next generation. Like the people who are going out and building huge businesses in their own right. In some ways, it's kind of a talent incubator in a way. Maybe I should put more effort into thinking about how to capture that value for my investors and for myself. I mean, we've seeded people who've left this company before. So they're like, I want to go and start my own business. And I'm like, well, let me know when you're ready and I'll write you a check. Not a particularly large check, but, you know, vote of confidence check. And particularly a check that you can then take to your other prospective investors and say,
This is my boss, my old boss that gave me
my old boss gave me the money. And, you know, you put money into Casey's company, you put money into my company. So that was, that's fun. I mean, the things that will help you succeed here are the things that will help you succeed anywhere. And if you don't have them, you should cultivate them. And how do you cultivate them? You cultivate them by surrounding yourself with other people who embody those values. So ambition, self-awareness, curiosity. Those are really the most important things. Those are very determinative over time, because if you have them, they'll improve and compound and refine over time. And it just makes you a much better weapon, right? And I cannot tell you, it's really quite sad, the number of people who will send me a resume, and let's say they're like mid to late career, and like we hire people at all career stages, obviously, but it's a question of mentality, right? They'll send me a resume, and I'll read the resume, and it says, this person does not understand what a recruiter needs to see in a resume. You've probably seen this yourself if you've done recruitment, right? If they don't understand what I need to see in a resume, how the hell are they going to understand what I want to see in a report or in a finished product? Right? The resume is like very straightforward, and if they can't empathize with me enough to understand what the resume must contain, this is very difficult. Well, it's just clueless. But like if you've been in the workforce for a year, I'll forgive it. But if you've been in the workforce for 30 years and you've still never seen a resume that makes you think, this is what a resume should look like, what the hell have you been doing? It's a bit of a problem. You can always fix that, right? Just read up on it, like get curious. What is a good resume meant to be? So yeah, ambition, because it'll drive you. Right, at the end of the day, it's not my job to stand in front of you and give you a motivational speech every day. It's your job to get out of bed and know what you want and go and get it. Self-awareness. Why is self-awareness important? Because you need to know where you are and where you're going and how you're going to get there. And in particular, the biggest failing I've seen of otherwise ambitious and competent people is they lack self-awareness, which means that they, like myself in previous jobs, just kind of cannonball between problems, making more problems. It's not a position you want to find yourself in, because ultimately you'll be rendered unemployable by the fact that however brilliant you are, there'll be younger people who are cheaper and just as brilliant, if not more brilliant. I've seen this as well many times in people, and it's really quite sad. Like usually not amongst candidates, usually amongst people I know socially or whatever, and trying to help them understand, like, why is it that you interviewed at 20 places and got no callbacks, no second round interviews? Yeah, are you off-putting? I'm not off-putting. I'm a nice guy. I'm a family guy. I'm a friendly guy. I've got good friends. You know, like, there is an aspect of this that you would appreciate if you had sat in my chair for a year. Your curiosity obviously drives you forward. And then the other, and I've written a blog post about this as well. I write blog posts about all kinds of things. The blog post is called "Stuff You Should Have Been Taught in College But You Weren't." It's super important, particularly, well, basically at any stage in your career. But you got to have a good track record. Right? And in particular, if you are the sort of person we want to hire here, it is highly likely that either you've just switched careers, or by the time you're like mid to late career, we can't afford you.
Right.
But you're running your own thing, right? But there's just a huge difference between a new grad or about to be grad, say, so about to graduate senior, good school, engineering school, 3.9 plus GPA, mechanical engineering, good projects from school. And I ask you, can you give me an example of a project where you used your mechanical engineering skills to solve a problem that you didn't have to do for a class? And they say, good. I'm like, well, kiss of death, right? Or if they say, yeah, like my house is falling down, so I fixed it by like engineering this part that I got cut on send cut send, or like I machine my own water jet cutter and cut it out, or like some guy last week basically sent me an email saying, just finished up at Caltech, I'm in town for another week. Here's a video of a jet engine that I built in my dorm room.
That's impressive.
Made him an offer. It's very hard to build a jet engine on your own, like out of the goodness of your own heart, and then not be good enough for us. I'll put it that way. It's really important to have all those pieces in place. The crazy thing is, these are things that you should be taught in college, right? Anyone can have or learn these skills, and they're absolutely critical to succeeding in the workplace. But I cannot for the life of me understand why so many people go through as much of their careers as they can on autopilot without ever really thinking about, like, why am I here? What am I doing? What is my role in this organization? What does my boss really want? What does my boss's boss really want? What does the customer really want? It's kind of mind-blowing.
Can you train that, or are people just born with that?
I have to believe you can train it. I trained myself in it somehow. I mean,
Okay.
I failed at this for years and years and years, really. I was clueless, could not understand why I wasn't getting traction despite solving problem after problem. I mean, like the fact that at JPL, I was like reprimanded for solving problems too quickly should tell you everything you need to know. Like I was clueless to the fact like JPL did not want their problem solved that way. And at the end of the day, my job was to solve the problems they wanted solved the way they wanted them solved. Not to feel bad about the fact that I was getting punished for doing what I thought was my job better than they'd asked. I didn't, found my way here, but I think you can learn it. And it really helps to surround yourself with other people who see the world that way. Ambitious people who are determined to make something of their lives, determined to make every decade of their career count. Particularly if you're just graduating, it's really important that you get a job. And it may be that, like, for whatever reason, the best job offer you've got is not what you want to do. But you applied to it, or someone made you an offer through the network or something, and maybe it's remachining car parts. Maybe it's, one of my best buddies in engineering, his college job was reconditioning sex toys. Not a prestigious job, right? Not a well-paid job, but a job that needed to be done. And it, hard to believe, generated GDP, and he did a great job, and it led to his next job, right? But if you graduated and you didn't take employment for anything other than a very good reason, people are going to wonder, like, why not? And if you did take a job and then you just kind of phoned it in because you're like, this is not a real job, I don't like this job, it's not the job I want, how are you going to get your next job? It could be like washing dishes for all I care. I would rather hire someone who was ambitious and with it and had made lemonade out of lemons washing dishes for a year, rather than do nothing with their lives. Or like, work on projects in their own time or whatever, than someone who, got moved on from a really good job at a prestigious organization because they couldn't motivate themselves to go that extra, 400 feet, not even a mile, to make sure that the thing that they were delivering was the right thing at the right time for the right person that done the right way. Particularly if you want to work with a high degree of autonomy in a small organization, you've got to fill in the gaps.
High agency people who do things.
That's part of it. Yeah. High agency can also be very individualistic though, and there's a time and a place for that. But in a team, you also need to know how you fit into the team, and like where you bring strengths and where other people need to bring their strengths to cover your weaknesses. That's part of self-awareness, and it's as I said, it's like in the screening interviews, that's the thing that people fall down with the most.
Okay.
Yeah. I
So,
get lack of ambition. I get lack of talent, lack of skill, and lack of curiosity a lot. But lack of humility, I'd say, or like lack of calibrated humility, or lack of, particularly amongst like very ambitious, high achieving people. So I remember one guy who was he was a Olympic level swimmer, who also had like a technical degree and related work experience, and he couldn't tell me of a single example of a time where he'd failed. And I was like, well, either you've never challenged yourself enough, or you're just oblivious. Like 99% chance you're oblivious, and in fact you're failing all the time, causing problems that other people are picking up after you.
mm-hmm.
You're just not aware of it. It's a real problem.
Too big of an ego.
Maybe not even that. I wouldn't, in the people I know who have these issues, I wouldn't characterize it as downstream of the ego.
Really?
If anything, if you have the ego and like the positive self-regard, even the narcissism, it should motivate you to make sure that other people like what you're doing, right? The narcissist needs to be appreciated. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to psychoanalyze too much. Everyone who works here is a weirdo, and we have some like world-class artists here. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I assume that's the type of person. And what do you guys do like when you're not working? Is this you guys go hang out or play games or?
I mean, people at the company sometimes organize social events. I occasionally attend them. I'm not a drinker, and I'm not that much fun at parties, so I tend to know where my strengths are. I tend to work in my free time, work some more. I work occasionally on non-Terraform related subjects as well, or like projects. Various
Work on
things.
parenting, maybe.
Parenting, obviously, but like that digital pipe organ, for example.
Oh, yeah,
I built
yeah.
that from scratch, for example, just as a like fun side project with the kids, actually. Elon points out that collegiality is actually not a good thing beyond a certain point, because it is more important, particularly in a high-stakes technical organization against deadlines and financial constraints and so on, that managers are able to hold people accountable and vice versa, than that they are liked by them.
Okay.
And I always say when I promote someone here, the hardest part of your job is that now you are responsible for the success of your team. They are not allowed to fail. You being liked is optional, but you succeeding is mandatory, which sounds like some psycho level shit. But if you think about it, there's no other way of running an organization. It's not a popularity contest, and I'm not giving someone responsibility so they can like achieve more love from people. What they will get is respect. But the thing is, if you are in a team and one of those team members like puts their hand up to take the hardship assignment of being the boss of that team for however long, and they can always say, I've had enough of this, I'd like someone else to have a go now. What they're looking for is, I want someone who takes my career and my progression seriously and gives me demanding goals and holds me accountable against those goals and helps me obtain the resources I need to succeed and forces me to work on it even when I don't want to. Because at the end of the day, I want to get up and stay in bed sometimes, right? And after a year, if they've made me successful, I will respect them for it, and I will like them for it, and I'll admire them for it. And if they've just gratified my ego and allowed me to fail, I will hate them. Right? And I've seen this so many times, not so much here, occasionally here, but I saw this every day at JPL, and I saw it every day in a previous startup, and I saw it every day in academia, and I see it every day in the economy at large. Managers believe their job is to be liked. Salespeople's job is to be liked. Manager's job is to be hated in a productive way, or resented sometimes, but not to allow their people to fail. If people, like even really high agency, self-directed people with a good coach, don't care how good the athlete is, they can always do better with a good coach. Right? With the right coach, they can always do better. And with the right manager, no matter how brilliant you are, how self-directed you are, how autonomous you are, you can always do better. You can always achieve more. If it's a good manager, 10, 20, 30% more. Now compound that over time. It makes a huge difference. And I'm very demanding in that respect. I insist that the managers here succeed and help the people succeed. It's really important. Actually, just a month or so ago, I'm going to make a blog post at some point. I like explicitly laid out like the career progression steps here. Doesn't matter where you come in. I expect you to make at least one step every year. Figure out. You cannot stagnate.
Another one. Nice.
Not even caffeinated today.
Strong.
Yeah, and there's probably, like if you came in as like someone who just finished high school with no like tertiary education, and you wanted to leave as like a senior VP, so it's like 10 levels. So like plausibly you could make it, if you were super ambitious and sharp and you did the work in your own time and you studied and so on, I'll promote you like as you're ready. I promoted someone 3 times in 1 year before, right? So you could plausibly come out of high school if you're smart enough and dedicated enough at 19, and you could be running a project here at 22, right? Without any formal knowledge to begin with. If you had the right chops, the right grit, right? It's somewhat easier, I think, if you've got formal training in mechanical engineering, because there's just a lot of stuff you've got to know. And it really helps to like sit there with other mechanical engineers for a few years and like absorb that knowledge and have some fun in college. You don't have to though. A good number of people here either didn't finish college, didn't go to college, or went to college something else. Like me, got useless physics. You can learn it. Now, actually, here's a question that someone asked me. You should ask me. I wrote a blog post called "You Should Be Working on Hardware" a couple of years ago, and I addressed it in my mind to some very successful software entrepreneurs that I know, some of whom have invested in the company, on the proviso that like they're not getting any younger, they're already richer than God. It's time for them to like flog their company off to Google or whatever they need to do, or like, I don't know, hire a professional CEO and go up to the chairman or something, right? You can always step back in later and go and work on hardware, because if you want to do something cool on hardware, it's going to take a long time. You got to start young, and it's going to take a lot of money. So it helps that you're rich, right? But like what Jeff Bezos did with Blue Origin, I think is a wasted opportunity, because he's in his 60s now, and he doesn't have time
to finish it.
It'll get somewhere. It's gotten somewhere already, but like, he's not going to have Bezos City on the moon with 1 million people by the time he dies, unless we invent immortality. It's not going to happen. Whereas I think if he'd started with his current financial resources when he was 25 and worked till he was 85, that's 60 years. That's enough time to build a real empire in space. So you should work on hardware. Fortunately, I guess, most of the people who read this blog post and then went and destroyed their lives were like high school students and college students who were like, you're right. But I think actually in retrospect, like if they'd gone into software, LLMs are doing that anyway. Like, do you really want to be like an LLM jockey for the rest of your life? Probably not. So I think it's still like had positive effect. And yeah, I mean, no one's going to save us. There's no cavalry. Right? We're going to have to reindustrialize. Even since Trump's first term, we've really dropped the ball on reindustrialization. A lot of, China 12 years ago, I guess Trump's first term was 9 years ago. China 9 years ago was nowhere near as competitive as they are relative to the United States as they are now. In some ways, there are some other major structural problems at China that are more intense now than they were 10 years ago. So it's not, we're down but not out. The United States is still by far the richest country, by far the highest level of education, by far the best resources, the best laws, the best financing situations. We need something like 10,000 entrepreneurs to come and give it an honest go, and 100 of them will be really successful, and another 1,000 of them will be life-changing, like generational wealth level successful, and the remaining 8,900 will have a terrific life experience and many character building moments, and also contribute in their own way. But like, it really is a numbers game. Yeah,
we got to get the best people in and working, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're over time. It's been a long interview. I could keep going, but
you have to come back sometime.
Yeah,
I'll come down to San Diego.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
A former employee who's down there, and I'm thinking of having him start up a project. So
let me know for
Terraform
sure.
San Diego.
That'd be great.
It would be great. Yeah. I want to do desalination at like massive scale.
San Diego's a great place to do that.
Great place. I want to do 5 million acre feet. I want to carve a tunnel from the harbor in San Diego all the way under the mountain into the Salton Sea. Have a desalination plant about halfway, and actually it's far enough from the ocean that you could have just an inclined plane the whole way. Right? So don't need any locks. It's just like a gentle river that flows down to the Salton Sea, and then obviously you can sail your boats around there. So like the tunnel would have to be high enough for sailboats, and then another canal that goes from there down to the Sea of Cortez, so you can sail into the Gulf of California via San Diego via the aircraft carriers and stuff.
Yeah.
Hang out at Salton Sea, where we'll build a city of 20 million people, call it Hyperdrive City, mostly on probably like the Indian land that's currently under the water because it was flooded like 100 years ago. And so like Venice, like a square mile of Venice. 1 square mile wide and a mile high, just a cube.
I love it.
Yeah.
To me,
Whales and stuff.
when you talk about turning solar energy into useful things, it's like such a generic vision. It can be big if you have a big imagination, but if not, it just like closes down real quick. But when you talk about running a river and building a city and desalinizing all of that water, I think it really sort of like brings into the frame what's possible here. And it's still a 20-person company right now. And if you're doing something like building a $20 million city a decade, or 20 million person city a decade or so from now, it's absolutely incredible. And
It wouldn't just be like Terraform company town. Right? The idea is to be like hundreds of thousands of businesses.
sure,
Doing everything.
sure,
We just create the technology
facilitate it.
that changes the phase, right? That flips the trade from buy to sell or sell to buy, right? On that land, for example, and means that like, this giant rusty engine of like commerce can like start up again and then work.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let me know when you're down there and when you get started on the project. It sounds like something fun.
Man, we're talent constrained on this project. So if you're hell-bent on building the desalination technology that will enable us to effectively irrigate coastal deserts all over the world, which includes much of the west coast of Africa, much of the west coast of Australia and South America, much of the west coast of North America, and even much of the Middle East, with nothing but solar arrays, a few pumps, and some plastic, then get in touch because we want to work with you. And this needs to be done. Our target is $99 an acre foot, which is like, I don't know, a couple of cents per cubic meter or something, ridiculously cheap. And but I believe it's possible. Like physics says it's possible, so we just got to figure out how.
Love it.
Sure.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate your time.
Old man grunting.
Both of us.